There will be turn lanes constructed, a left turn lane and a right turn lane on Forestville Road into the site. A traffic signal will be installed when volumes support that need. And frontage widening will be constructed along Forestville Road with the construction of Access A. And frontage widening is widening for half of the planned ultimate section. And the ultimate section for Forestville Road is a 4-lane median divided roadway with side paths. And there's a similar situation on Burlington Mills Road at each access point. So there will be turn lanes, a right turn lane at Access B, a right turn lane and left turn lane on Burlington Mills at Access C and at Access D as well. Frontage widening will also be constructed along Burlington Mills Road with the construction of Access C and Access D because those access points have the property frontage. And the ultimate section for Burlington Mills Road is a 4-lane median divided with bike lanes and sidewalks. The next slide just lists the details of the improvements we just discussed, as well as that timeline that the developer is committing to. All the improvements will be designed following state and national guidelines to ensure safety and site distance requirements are met. And I think Laura is now going to speak a little bit more about the conceptual layout.
Thanks, Brittany. So this is certainly probably the biggest ask. It's like, okay, well, we see it laid out. What are these lots? What can they look like? So this is the concept layout that we have come up with since we last spoke. So this is done using the cluster option. So I know we had a lot of discussion about, what is a cluster and what is the benefit of doing a cluster? Well, you can see how, this is a 40% open space requirement. This is what that looks like. You have expansive areas of natural preserved areas where you've got a lot of opportunities for neighbors to have to back up to natural areas rather than backing up to lots. So it allows for a 40% open space requirement rather than a typical subdivision, which only requires 10. As you see, it concentrates the developments in clusters, which we talked about, and also it allows these to be protected and maintained by the OHOA rather than being a part of a residential lot. Again, this shows all single-family detached, no townhomes or any other attached product at all. And it also, if you notice, all the smaller lots are located on the interior of the site, and all the larger detached lots are located on the peripheral of the subdivision. That was done on purpose to try to create those nice transitions between, we want the most active lots in the center of the subdivision, and then creating those transition areas as we move further out to the existing neighbors and subdivisions around it. This concept shows a lot range between 5,000 and 7,500 square foot lots, and the lot widths between 40 and 60 feet. There are both front-loaded lots, as you see around the edges, which I talked about. Front-loaded is what you when you have a garage in front, and then you've got your driveway accessed by the public street in front of the house. And then we've also got rear loads that you see in kind of that light orange or peach color, and the yellow, those are the rear loads where you would have lots being accessed by rear alleys, and then the driveways would be on the rear off of those alleys. So the driveways wouldn't be in the front, just to make that clear. Which is a concept that we're excited about. Also, you can see, and I'll touch on this, is just all the open space that we're showing. This, and you can see how this translates into as we kind of gray out the lots and look at the overall open space. So the open space under a cluster is 89, just under 90 acres. We're showing 91 acres of open space, so we're exceeding the minimum requirement. And then based on that, half of the 12% of active open space has to be active, and that equates to around 13 and a half acres, and we're showing over 17 acres of active open space. And again, that's open space that is not in a sensitive environmental area. So that's open space that's going to be programmed open space as well. And you see the red public greenways there that are going to be paved and constructed on the developer's dime, not the town's. This is, that'll be a critical part of this neighborhood. It'll be a nice start to a regional network in this area of town. And then you've got the soft trails as well that we talked about. So this is just showing, again, those active areas and showing minimum acreages, so you all can see that those actually have been defined and aren't just a haphazard area that we're not defining. We've defined those. This is what this can look like. This is some of the passive open space images. There's an emphasis on native plants, so we're not just stripping things out and putting a row of crepe myrtles down open space, which can be nice, but what we're really wanting to do is take advantage of local pollinator opportunities and butterfly gardens and things that we really feel like can be take it. We want to celebrate the character of Rollsville. We don't want to just come in and do something that's not in keeping with the surrounding area in terms of open space and plant life. This is the active open space. Again, we're committing. We talked about how we're committing to the clubhouse and pool. We're also committing to pickleball courts, which aren't just for active seniors. They are for all ages, myself included. So that's something that everyone can enjoy, as well as we know we're going to have a lot of natural play areas for the children as well. This is the paved greenways. We all know what paved greenways look like. But they'll meet the minimum town standards as part of their brand new greenway plan that they've adopted, that you all worked so tirelessly on. And then one thing that I'm excited about is the natural soft surface trails. So for folks like me who have been running longer than I care to admit, it's nice on the joints to have a nice soft surface trail and actually kind of get lost within the natural areas rather than a just maintained area. So that's something that we're excited about, and something that I think is currently not seen on a large scale within the town of Roseville within subdivisions. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Jeff to talk about the architectural conditions. Thank you.
Laura. So I know this information is in your packet. This is, the wall of text slide here. I'll refrain from reading this to you, but I do want to highlight a few things. And then we have some examples of where these architectural conditions that we're committing to, where they show up on the building facade. But we're committing to, raised foundations, either raised slab or crawl space style foundations for all the homes, no slab on grade. That gives us an opportunity to do some masonry, brick or stone veneer around the base of the home. That sets up the elevations to have multiple materials, masonry and siding. We've have some other commitments in here about the primary roof pitch, not having flat roofs. There'll be a minimum 512 pitch. Committing to weather-resistant materials, no vinyl on the siding. We do have in the condition here that we would use vinyl or other trim materials for just for the trim only, but no siding. Garage doors will have glass inserts, the top panel there, and then some other commitments here about the building planes that face streets and not having any uninterrupted building planes, so that we'll have windows or other architectural features along the facade that will help add interest for street-facing elevations. And then we have a commitment here also for some diversity with the different plan types, elevations, colors, et cetera, as we move through the community, not having homes across from each other or adjacent to each other with similar repeating elements. This is typical front entry with the garage door facing the public street here, but you see, again, the opportunity for raised foundation steps up onto the porch. The porches are committed elements. All the homes will have a front porch, also with the masonry across the front and sides on the public-facing streets. The commitment to the cementitious siding materials, no vinyl on that. And then also roof pitch elements, eave commitments, and also here you see the glass panel in the garage door to add some interest there. For the homes with the garage in the back, this is a typical elevation there. The thing that's obvious here is you don't have the garage door facing the public street. It's not on the front here, but these same conditions still apply here with the raised elevation, again, the front porch, and the other commitments that we're making as well. We anticipate there being, and the plan that we've provided shows 4 different lot sizes. And so what we've done is I think I shared with you, we're designing specific architecture for this site. So I don't have any homes that are existing in this market to fit some of the alley-loaded products, but we went through our portfolio and pulled out some examples that we provided here. The top being some renderings of a 35-foot wide alley-loaded product, again, the garage in the rear. The photos across the bottom here are our existing homes. I think these are in Wendell Falls. These reflect what we anticipate here with the smaller, more narrow alley-loaded products. Again, you see some of those elements with the front porches across the front there on the elevations, and then some of the other details with the raised foundations, et cetera. Similarly, these are some of the front-loaded products that we anticipate here. We do have a couple of communities where we're building this product right now. Would invite anyone who would like to see them out. The 2 closest, one is at Knightdale Station. That's actively under construction right now. We have homes being built. We have an active sales center that's open there. So it's open, I think, every day of the week. So please, if you're interested, you can stop by and take a tour of some of the products there. Those products and price range we anticipate will be very similar to the front-loaded products that are here. Holding Village, we're also building there. Those products you'll see are a little bit bigger. The lots in that particular case are a little bit larger, and the price range is a little bit higher than we'll see here. Again, we think there would be 4 main product categories here, the 2 front-loaded products and the 2 rear-loaded products. The width of those will range from 30 feet to 50 feet, and that's the home size. The floor plans will range from around 2,200 to about 3,500. We get asked this question, so I want to go ahead and just share it with you. The price ranges that we're projecting right now are from the low 500s to the mid 700s, depending again on the product size. That's where we think the project will start in the community here. Obviously, market conditions will dictate some of that as we move forward. So I just want to wrap up with a couple of points here that I want to underscore. Staff presented that this proposal is consistent with the town plans. We are committed to some early construction of the traffic improvements, as Brittany mentioned. The intersection improvements we're committing to prior to the 100th certificate of occupancy being issued, which means that those improvements would be built with phase 1 of our development. Just the timing of that, we're going to have to start early on that and get that improvement in. And then all of the driveway improvements prior to any COs being issued for homes that are going to access those driveways, we'll do the off-site commitments as well. So those will come online again early in the process, and will be there as the project is built out. As Laura illustrated, we do have the 40% open space, including the active recreation elements that we've committed to for that. We think it meets and exceeds the town requirements for that, and we think it adds value to the community. And so we're excited about that. And again, the architectural quality, hopefully that comes through with the elevations that we presented here tonight. Hopefully our presentation has provided you with some detail that you had requested previously. Again, I want to recognize the folks on the team here who've worked really, really hard to pull this information together. Again, we hope we've met the goal of getting you some more information to consider. And with that, I will turn it back over to the board.
Any questions from the board before I open it up for public comment?
I have some questions. Meredith, you need to.
Stay here or let?
No,
Mr. Westmore?
I'm gonna have questions for each one, so
Okay.
Mr. Westmore, Lynn can come up there first. Thank you for giving us some details, because I was one of the ones that said,
Yeah.
I don't have anything, so I appreciate y'all working on that a lot. And I got this from Meredith a couple days ago or last week, and read a few things. And I do have some questions. Like, for example, you said it would be 18-inch foundations, but on the condition, it says on one elevation. So is it just on one elevation, or is it 18 inches all the way around?
So the condition, I believe, and I'm gonna pull this back up here. Bear with me one second. So the condition is that it will be 18 inches all the way around, okay? And I want to just reread the condition here. Foundations will be constructed at a minimum height of 18 inches in not less than one location on any home. So it's a minimum of 18 inches all the way around. But in addition to that, what we added to it was that any side facing a public street would have brick or stone veneer on it, as opposed to just a parged raised foundation. So that again, anything visible from the street or anything fronting a street. And so that was the intent there was, and if we misspoke, I apologize, but that's kind of what we meant. It was the foundation will have an 18-inch minimum reveal all the way around, but we will add the veneer on those public-facing sides.
Okay. I have some questions for Laura.
Yes,
So
sir.
you said that initially you said it was going to be a 4-acre park, and then it was discussed at 6, and you put 6 back in. But a lawyer one time told me that the big print giveth and small print taketh away. So when I read these conditions on here about that, it says, the development shall dedicate approximately 6 acres to be used towards the development's active open space requirement, which adjoin and surround 4124 Burlington Mills, Wake Pen, blah, 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 Town of Roseville, for a public park subject to various grading, landscape slope, roadway, pedestrian access, utility easements, as may be mutually beneficial to the development for the completion of the park. So are we going to have some of the streets, when I look at that, that's about 800 feet or 900 feet of roadway surrounding that park. Are we going to have that as part of our calculation on there?
I think the roadway would be part of the, well, you want to touch on that, Jeff?
The intent is not for that road to be shown,
understand your
that is
question.
shown on the plan that comes in along the fire station. The intent is for the 6 acres that sits to the north of that. When we say, various, other components, it really, what we were trying to do was describe what the town might do there, that internal to that 6 acres. There might be, we don't know what might be there, but there may be a building that needs utilities provided, as for an example. But we're not trying to say that our development infrastructure will impede the 6 acres. It was just us trying to be thorough and saying that that's what we would anticipate might go there. Our intent is to dedicate the land to the town, and the town can do with it as you see fit. But we're not trying to limit our obligation to provide you 6 unencumbered acres. The encumbrances that would happen after the site's developed, I guess, as a park, is the intent there. We're not going to hand you 6 acres and say, oh, by the way, there's a 60-foot right-of-way on it, and we got a big sewer line coming through here, and oh, there's a water line over here. That's not what the intent of that was. I just
But
wanted
it
to be clear
says
there.
you can do that and
Well,
calculate it.
we wrote that in there so that if the town does that, we don't get into a situation where we say, well, it's going to be a park, and then a citizen comes up and says, I thought it was supposed to be a park, but now you got a parking lot in there, or now you got a building with utilities. That's the only intent there. We're not trying to, limit what the town can do. Like I say, we were just trying to, like I
Would
say,
it
we're
be
just trying to be fair.
clearer or simpler to say a gross or 6 acres?
That's a fair point. No issue with that at all. Like I say, that's not the intent to, like I say, make this a net 2-acre park. I think, and again, the approximately 6 acres, if it's 6.2, that's approximately 6. We're not in any way trying to, say that we're going to be less than 6 acres. Again, it's the plan we have now is hand-drawn. And so some of the, the areas are, they're a little fuzzy, but we're not in any way trying to make this less than 6 acres.
So I'm still struggling with, and I had Meredith show me a cluster subdivision diagram. And she emailed me these diagrams. And she emailed me one that this was cluster and this was a standard. And she had another one that was very similar. So when I look at this plan, and what I want to know is, when I take and pull up Wake County topo maps, right off of wakecounty.gov, a lot of the open space is Blue Line Stream. And Blue Line Stream can't be covered over, is that correct, for development?
Correct.
So a lot of what we have is not developable, period, that's open, is that correct?
The areas that you don't see in the light green are part of the natural, and a significant amount of those are environmental features.
And with that, also on the pond, y'all talked about wanting to keep it, but yet in here, it has another one. For the dam safety, the development shall, to the extent permitted by the state and federal jurisdictions over streams, contingent upon an engineer's favorable evaluation. So how does the town of Roseville know that that element's going to stay? And how hard would it be to get that engineer's, commitment early on the process, instead of this open-ended that, oh, we got in there, we did some grading, there's a couple of bad spots, we don't know, let's push it over and let just that element disappear?
So what are you looking for? You're looking for an earlier an engineering assessment that's,
Yeah, but how do we know that that element's going to stay into here? Because it says contingent upon.
sure. Mike, do you want to talk about, we do have as we're fielding engineering questions, let me hand off to the project engineer.
Hi, I'm Mike Sanchez. I'm a project engineer with the McAdams Company. Good to meet you, good to be here. I can answer part of the question, and Jeff, you'll need to answer another part of the question. So, sir, you're absolutely right. In order to make sure that that existing dam is not a high-hazard dam or would not meet those requirements, there'd have to be an engineering analysis that would have to be done. Jeff, what you might need to speak to is how early would Toll commit to doing that analysis to determine if it's a high-hazard dam? And then Toll might also have to make a decision as to if it is a high-hazard dam, or if NC Dam Safety were to render that a high-hazard dam, would Toll step in and say, okay, fine, we'll keep it, we'll just have to make the modifications so it's a high-hazard dam?
Yeah, again, the intent is to save the pond because we feel like it adds value to the property. It's adjacent to the park. We've routed the greenway over there so that it would work around the pond. Some of the other trails, connect. It's a destination point within our open space. And so, again, we're not trying to say, look, we're trying to create an out for us. But what happens if we do determine that that's a high hazard dam and it needs to be rebuilt? Then the shape of that pond may change, right? We're committing to keeping the pond, but again, there may be some details as we get into it that might change the configuration of that. And, what we're trying to do is not create a situation where we're committing to something knowing that we have to study it, and if it changes in some ways, then now the finger's out and going, oh, you guys didn't live up to your commitment, because that's not what we're trying to do. But we're trying to recognize that as we're early in the process here, there are many, many, many steps that we have to go through to get to the end. Typically, that analysis would be done during the construction drawing phase. We have, roadways, we have greenway trails, we have people that are going to be downstream of that dam. And so it's in our interest to make sure it's safe. And so I think that's what we're trying to say here is that, when would we commit to doing that? It will be done during the construction drawing process, which will be, over the next 12 months or so is when that would typically happen. Because again, we're going to be required to look at it because we have roadways that cross that stream that's downstream of the dam. And so it's going to be a required element, that we know. It's sort of like saying, we're going to build this plan contingent on the town of Rollsville approving our CDs. And the staff are going to review our CDs, and they're going to say, well, you said you were going to do this, and now you submitted these plans that are detailed engineering drawings, and we're going to review them. And then they're going to say, look, you've committed to these things, and so we're going to hold you to it, right? Or they may say that, look, in addition to the things you've said, some of our review may change this and tweak this slightly because it needs to meet our ordinance, et cetera. So there's going to be those multiple reviews as we go along. I think, again, writing the condition is we're just trying to, again, lay the cards on the table that, look, these are things that have to happen.
This gives you an out. What you just told me is not consistent with this in my understanding, because this says contingent upon the dam. It doesn't say we're going to keep a pond here, and if the dam's not suitable, we'll rebuild it and we'll have some water, pond containment area. So that's what I'm trying to understand. How do we, if we approve this or we want this, how do we make sure that that's part of this element?
Contingency. Basically says in the event of it's not suitable, that Toll Brothers will build some water feature in that location. It's your prerogative to add those conditions, if you will, to your approval. The only thing I can tell you is, again, we went from a bubble plan to really trying to put together some details for y'all to consider. We can wordsmith those as much as we can. Our intent is not to try to work our way into an out. Our intent was to try to hustle and try to get in here with some information, with some details that we could talk about and have some meaningful discussions on. It is not an intent to give ourselves an out. Say again, we're trying to
again, lay our cards on the table and say, these are the things that we see when we look at this plan. These are the things that we think about, that we talk about with our design team. These are the things that we think are important. But also trying to recognize the reality that we live in as far as how these plans will be reviewed and approved, moving forward. So if, I don't know if I can say it any more clearly, like say, if we're not trying to write this so we're giving ourselves an out, right? And that's on the public record.
So I'm still struggling with this as a conventional subdivision versus cluster, because the piece that Meredith, and I'll pass this around, I got a couple of these, shows a square blocked off group, and her show of cluster has more open space around it. So I'm really trying to understand how your math and your arithmetic works to that. And the same thing on your amenity center. So I rode around and looked at some existing ones within Roseville, like over through behind Redford Place and so forth. How much of that is going to be parking lot, pool deck, building, and how much is going to be play space? Something that a kid could play on. I mean, it's 4.5 acres, but what's the reality of how much is really a kid can run around and kick a ball?
So I'm gonna tip our hand a little bit to staff here, because when we come in with the site plan, our intention is to have as little amount of parking as possible. We develop greenway trails that connect to this site. We connect other soft surface trails. There's going to be sidewalks throughout the development. We want to encourage people to walk so that we can provide more amenity space. I can't answer you specifically to say there's going to be X number of parking spaces. We're going to try to keep that to the minimum. Staff may be able to, I mean, we don't have a building or programming where we can calculate what that parking is going to be. For a site like this, on typical amenities, we're probably looking somewhere, what we would see is historically would be somewhere around 40 spaces. Now, again, that's got to be calculated based on how, the town's requirements are. But what we want to do is, to your point, we don't want to build a parking lot. We don't want to build a Walmart where the parking lot's only full during Christmas and it sits empty the rest of the year. We would like to have more space so we can build the clubhouse, the pool, have
How
green space.
wide would these thoroughfare roads be around that?
You guys know, top of your head.
I know it's on I know the right of way is on the
The collector, the 90-foot right-of-way on the collector,
I don't know that we're
60
on
foot
that.
on the residential.
Let me go back to.
Would you like me to pull up?
I know on our concept it states what the right of way width is in the legend. Where is it?
So I'm just wondering, it's a nice pool, you got 550 homes, probably have a swim team. Where are all those people going to park with only 40 spaces when they bring all their kids to go to a swim meet?
So you've got not to skate over that, but I just want to state that we've got the residential collector, I believe, is a 60-foot right-of-way, and then the local residential street is a 50.
So right away 60, how much of that includes sidewalk and the multipurpose trail?
The back-to-back, it would include the sidewalk. It would not, some of it would be included with, the portion of the greenways that's adjacent to the street that's part of the sidewalk. It would include that. But then, of course, there's a large number of the greenways that aren't adjacent to that would not be included within that right-of-way.
So would there be room along that during a large event at that for have parking for those folks along that thoroughfare safely at 50 foot?
I know I know that we've ran into this before on other projects where we've and I believe that there is a right-of-way, and I think we've done the diagram. What was that right-of-way that we did on that other project? We demonstrated that it could move through with two cars parked on either side.
Right, that was 60-foot right away.
That was a 60-foot.
That's exactly right. We went through an exercise where we got pretty much the largest vehicle out there. It was like a GMC 3500 width, and we also made sure that parked exactly across the street from each other, and still were able to, and I contacted the fire chief, and he told me which truck that Rollsville uses, and we showed how the fire truck could weave its way through, even if you have two of these largest vehicles parked right across from each other.
So on this, that, if I'm understanding, we needed like 89 acres to meet the minimum, and you've got 91. But the building and the parking lot, how do they qualify as open space?
You want to answer that, Meredith?
In our land development ordinance, there are different types of open space, active and passive, and an amenity center is considered an active open space item.
Regardless of how much it's developed.
Our ordinance doesn't include that specificity.
Okay, fair enough. Let's see. So in the application, it says, this one is going back to cluster. Nobody in the last meeting could explain cluster to me, and Meredith tried to do this. But it says, and I'm going to find it here, about submitted content plan is one that is designed with the natural element of environment in mind. Open space will be distributed throughout the property. This allows the integration of outdoor spaces throughout the property. Residents will be able to enjoy natural sight lines and avoid unsightly development. Now, what I see is a whole lot of interior lots that are going to be on 5-foot property lines, is what you told me. 10 foot between them. How are they going to enjoy natural sight lines? Explain. Can y'all go on to this, why this qualifies as a cluster? Not just that it's meeting the arithmetic. Can you? And we check the boxes on the traffic study, but what makes it a cluster?
Sure.
And why is that good for Roseville?
Well, and I wasn't here, I apologize, I wasn't here for the UDO discussions LDO discussions where you talked about why a cluster subdivision belonged in your ordinance. So I'll have to explain why I think that this meets the cluster subdivision requirements that you deemed, that you wanted within Rollsville when you all adopted the LDO. But, first, when we first look at how this was laid out with just even this kind of elementary look at it, we talked about, okay, first of all, it's got to be 40% of open space, but it's also got to be, contiguous, roads can connect the open space, but it can't just be open space over here, open space over here, open space over here, open space over here. So obviously what Meredith, when she provided those two diagrams, like anything, when you explain it, it's a very kind of elementary, rudimentary way to explain it. So in a traditional subdivision without this, you would have, you wouldn't have continuous open space connections at all that would flow throughout the subdivision to create what you're seeing, which is connected lines of open space throughout the subdivision. That
We
wouldn't,
talked about that because on this diagram from Wake County, that's Blue Line Stream. All of that green is Blue Line Stream, can't
Sure.
be developed.
Sure.
So how does that make that, other than it's a natural feature, how could you put a conventional subdivision back in here? What makes that a cluster just because it's got the space that's not developable?
so the natural, great question. So the natural, as part of the Blue Line Stream, there's part of those areas that the natural open space that go beyond just the minimum Blue Line Stream that we also included within the 40% of open space. It's not just, as you see there, there's a lot of that kind of pale green area that kind of denotes additional natural open space that's beyond, your bare minimum blue line boundaries. And that was intentional. And there's also, in a conventional, there's also a minimum lot that can be built, and then you have a lot size, an overall lot size, and then you've got a minimum amount that has to be outside. It can't encompass more than a certain percentage of, the environmental feature, but you could have a lot that would have a portion of it that couldn't be developed, though, if your lot was big enough, that could be allowed.
Do you all see a lot of retaining wall work to go on in this subdivision?
That's an engineering question.
For this, so we've done a little bit of preliminary engineering. It wasn't quite this layout. We are, there will be some retaining walls. I guess it depends what some people call a lot or not. But, at this point, it's so preliminary that, and this layout is different than what we ran it on, it's hard to say. I mean, that's, typically we get into that when we start doing the preliminary, the next step to this, assuming this makes it past rezoning, the preliminary subdivision plan, that's when we start doing the preliminary grading and so forth, and we can work out retaining walls and lengths and heights and so forth.
So some of those retaining walls could put barriers to some of this natural spaces, potentially.
How so?
If they can't walk, you walking out the back of their house or having to go around, or if that wall is coming up to one of these BMPs or whatnot, could it keep them from going down into those areas?
So let's just say if you had a situation where you're walking out in your backyard and retaining wall is necessary, let's say not to infringe in a buffer, into the riparian buffer, I guess, yes, then you're I guess you're not prevented, you could jump off the wall into the buffer, but yes, the wall.
So if that wall is a certain height, does it require fencing?
Yes.
Would that block some of that vista that y'all are talking about?
I don't, like, for instance, I live just down the road in Wake Forest off of Forestville Road, and I have a retaining wall in my backyard that's got a little fence on it, but, I mean, I can look clear out to the buffer. It doesn't block the view at all.
Also, I think in a conventional subdivision, and I've done a lot of these, and there's also, you're right, Wake County has a cluster subdivision, Franklin County has a cluster subdivision that we implement often as well. And the two things that are important with those is it allows you to diversify your neighborhood. A conventional subdivision, you're doing one type of lot, and it becomes monotonous as you look down a street. What we've tried to do is introduce 4 different lot types that implement, so you have diversity within your neighborhood. And when you go to these different sections, it starts to feel you start to pick up a different kind of character. Now, what we've tried to do is be mindful of what's happening around us. So that's why I talked about earlier, when we have, the more traditional, we'll call it, although alley loaded is actually a traditional neighborhood design from the early American history. But, that's why we've tried to feature the more typical single-family lots on the periphery and try to do more of the smaller alley loaded in the kind of most interior to the site. So you start to have significant character areas within the subdivision that really starts to break up, and it starts to feel like you have multiple sense of a place throughout the subdivision, instead of just saying, okay, well, I've gone down one street, I know what this neighborhood's about, I don't need to see any more. But here, and that, why is that important? Well, within a cluster, it's not, like I said, it's not just one lot type. You're not just having a main amenity that's near the entrance to the subdivision, and then you've got a whole endless amount of, your lots that are all the same size, and you've got, 3 different housing choices on the same type of lot. As Jeff mentioned, we've, Toll has done, a phenomenal job of really adding architectural conditions. This is a neighborhood where what a cluster allows you to do is to go down to have a more distinct range of lot sizes that's going to allow for a more distinct range of residents. You know, you're going to have everyone from your early, neighborhood kids where they're very active in school. You're going to have the suddenly empty nesters that, are moving down
So
from
on
the.
this, they vary from 50 to 30 foot, from 75 to 90, but they're all rectangles.
They're all.
They're just a little bit bigger rectangle or a little bit smaller rectangle on your lot
Sure, because,
summary.
there's no such thing as a circle lot, so yeah, they're all rectangle. And I know what you're saying, but I want to emphasize that, if you look around in Roseville, there's not a lot of rear-loaded product.
So one of the issues I have with rear-loaded product is it goes to the total amount of impervious surface. So on 10 foot, that's about 12 foot from here to there. We put a tape measure, I'm going to bet you. On these 10-foot lots, one of them over here that some of y'all might know, it's in Wake Forest, is Austin Creek. Anybody familiar with Inside Wade down in Raleigh? Inside Wade's got a similar amount of homes and kind of layout. Is the sunlight can't get between these houses. The amount of sun, when you got two big structures sitting like this, and in the middle of the day, the sun only gets an hour or two. So initially, you go in and you put sod there, and it's pretty good. But within a few years, you've got water runoff issues because you can't keep that sod alive. And they end up putting stone or mulch, and you increase the amount of water. So when you have a larger lot, you have infiltration. And we have an issue here in Roseville with stone. Y'all identified engineering that there is some stone on site, correct? So we got to do some stuff. So we're going to get down to a level where there's some stone. It's not going to infiltrate. It's going to go and hit that stone, and it's going to run down towards this creek. So one of the issues how are y'all anticipating keeping that alive for, let's say, these houses? I think you said they would probably be around 80 to 100 years on that. How do we do that when they're so tight together? That's one of my questions. How does this cluster piece benefit that stormwater management and keeping that alive between those homes?
Yeah, Mike, do you want to come and talk about impervious, because I know you did some preliminary.
But there's a couple of different parts.
Can I interject and add a question to that too as well, if you don't mind?
Absolutely.
I've been listening everything so far, of course, just taking it in. And I know that our last meeting, we did talk a little bit in circles, but I'm just going to go ahead and come out with it. As far as clusters go, I've not seen the product. I don't know what one looks like. I think that's why myself and my colleague is probably having a little bit of a hard time. And yes, the cluster language is in our LDO. It is. I've seen it there. I'm not sure how it got there, but I'm going to be honest with you. After hearing and seeing what clusters look like or what they should be, I do have some concerns about clusters being listed in an RM or RL. I think clusters probably belong in more of an RH. That's just my opinion. My question is, if we're so married to this cluster design, is there any way, is the developer open to increasing those lot sizes to 10,000 square feet or more? That's my question. And it's just a question. It's just my opinion. Just wanting to see, are you open to these lot sizes being at least 10,000 square feet or more?
So the balance here that we have to keep is that the economics of this project, we're buying this from, a local landowner. And when we compare that to what we're proposing to develop here, there has to be some equity, if you will, in the cost, et cetera. And so once
see.
we start going to the larger lot sizes while maintaining the 40% open space, the project starts to sort of fall apart from that standpoint. So I think if we were to go with that example, the 10,000 square foot lots.
But that's
we
not
would-
feasible?
We would be pushing back toward the 12% open
Could you
space.
not
And that's
take
why I
a
was asking that
balance,
question.
some of this subdivision, instead of 100% of it being at these 6,000 square foot lots with some larger product? We got product in Roseville, half a mile down the road that's just sold for $1 million. We got comps that can support that. But we're putting everything at, what was our average home, 450 something when we were looking at that, is that right? And we're barely over that, so we're there, but told us some high-end product in town, in Wake County, right? I mean, you got some $1 million product.
We do, but again.
Yeah, and so our question, I think, is I'm concerned about the cluster and the close together, and you're talking about diversity, but no, they're all different homes and a little bit, but they all got the same 10 foot apart. So it's not going to look different at 10 foot apart. It's what I'm trying to explain to me how we're going to get vistas from these interior lots in here. What vista are they going to see?
Yes, I sense there's about 4 or 5 sort of open questions, and I just want to make sure, Mr. Cross, have we?
Yes, is it feasible to
Yeah.
increase your lot
So
size
I
to 10 to
think
12,000
within this
square feet?
concept, I would say no. I
Okay.
think the concept would have to change. And I would submit that with the lot mix that we have, the plan that we've drawn, I think there's 550 some odd lots on the concept plan that we have here. I think that calculates out to just under 2.5 units per acre. So again, from a yield standpoint, we're still under that.
I get that.
Medium density.
I get
And
that.
so, yeah.
I get that, and I understand it. No, I completely understand it, because the last time I read this was, we saw 600 units, right? You're still sticking to the 600 units. You've changed the cluster, which is great. Thank you so much. Again, wonderful presentation delivery. But what we just did was we just kind of changed the cluster mechanics and really kind of dressed it up with more single family. When I saw single family, I got excited about this product. I was getting ready to say, hey, let's go for it. Let's move forward with this thing. But the more and more I'm seeing that we still have 600 units. But I get it. It's just 15 years ago, we'd be, hey, rubber stamp, let's do it. Let's see what happens, right? 15 years ago. Today, with so many other developments going on, that's my concern.
Sure.
Is just the burst that's coming in a short time. So that's again my concern, and I just wanted to ask a question just to get some more education on that.
As we were going along, I just wanted to make sure we had addressed that.
Thank you, yes.
So.
I'll table
think
my
that-
questions
okay.
and let somebody else ask, and the public or whatnot, because
Right.
I've monopolized a lot of time, but thank y'all.
Real
I mean, I got to
quick
reserve the
question.
right to come back.
I have a real quick question as far as, the surface water generation. Understanding that you're not close to a final subdivision plan, but how close do you think this is to the number of stormwater basins that you'd actually see in the neighborhood?
I think it's pretty close. I think, based on just preliminary engineering, preliminary sizing, I think that's the number of SCMs that we would end up with.
Okay.
We have them, positioned, there may be opportunity. I guess I can use this. There may be opportunity to see if maybe we could try to combine these two and make it one, but then again, I'm not sure, I can't remember what's under this. If this is blue line through here, that won't work so well. So I think at one point we had one here and we split it into two for that reason, but I would say we should be pretty close on that.
Okay. If there are no other questions.
I've got a few questions, actually, yeah. Sorry. I'll start with an easy one. There are 2 renderings of the Greenway plan, one in the early, halfway through the packet, and the one toward the tail end, that they don't match up. There's a distinction between the hard and soft trails. That one, if you go back to where you just were, that one just has a general plan from what I can understand, and it has trail that I'm particularly interested in seeing stubbing out over onto Forestville Road on the southwest corner. Later on in the diagram, you don't come out at all over there in the next, that other one. That one right there doesn't even come out. And it's soft trail. Our plan for, excuse me, the greenway needs to be hard, excuse me, needs to be hard surfaced and stubbing out on Forestville Road. That whole corridor along Tom's Creek is vital to connecting to the Neuse River Greenway system. We have to get to Forestville Road on the southwest corner of your property. If we don't, it's a huge failure for the town. It's a huge failure for the residents. Huge failure. So I just don't like how I see two different plans, and then I don't like how I see soft trail throughout and no hard trail on that whole southern corridor of this property. So that's a big concern that I have to share, and I can't emphasize enough, after spending as many years as I have in Parks and Recreation, coming here now to see that as a complete omission. And like I said, that is vital to connecting to the town, to the Neuse River Greenway. That's my first question.
That's the road. When you start out, this is the greenway.
Oh, it's coming out there?
Yeah.
Okay,
So it just didn't get picked up.
okay, so it just
But the
needs to be
intention is to
transposed.
do this.
Okay.
Because this is so the plan, great question. So the plan here is what would act as a enforceable zoning condition that shows the connection ultimately out to Forestville Road, which is in keeping with the regional greenway plan.
Okay, so then if this is the plan and the legend, I'm getting old myself, when the colors that you're choosing to designate soft and hard are very close. So are you telling me in this plan that you're demonstrating here, that is a paved hard trail coming from Forestville and basically paralleling the swamp and the Tom's Creek all the way down to the southernmost tip?
So I see your question. So it looks like ultimately that is not currently shown as a paved greenway. So
Okay,
I hear your
that
concern.
really, that has to be paved, and in addition to that, in the southernmost tip of this property, it has to stub out right where you are right there in
Okay.
order for us to continue to connect to the town. I'm sorry, that is essential for us to connect to Neuse River Greenway. That's the only way we can get there. So that's extremely important. The open space that you have designated, 6 acres that you're talking about donating to the town, that's on the northernmost part of the property, is that correct?
Right here, yes.
One of the things that I know has been fairly discouraged is not having, or should I say, accessing a public park through a neighborhood street is really discouraged. A neighborhood street is a neighborhood street. So nobody wants people coming through their neighborhood just to access a public park. So this entrance that you have planned, I don't know how wide it is, or if it looks like it's a neighborhood street, and I don't see any parking or anything for that space. So this 6 acres that you're talking about designating to the town, or donating to the town, is then going to have to be activated by the town, which means public parking is going to have to be provided, and a lot of other things are going to have to change. I don't really see a great benefit the way it's laid out right now for the town as just giving us land for us to then figure out how to activate, figure out how to get people there, and figure out how to not make this more of a nuisance for the neighborhood with all the public traffic that could come this way, being a public park. So it just feels a little weird. If it actually went all the way to Burlington Mills, that would be different. You can have public access off of a main public road. It would make a lot more sense. It just doesn't feel right the way I'm seeing it illustrated here.
Is that, now, the reason why we did that is because the fire station will be here. So that was the reasoning of having town facilities across the street from one another. But noted.
Yeah, like I said, it just feels weird, the way it looks and the way you gain access to it. It just feels odd. And I just don't know what the commissioners are going to feel about that. I don't know what other people on the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board are going to feel about land that's public park nestled in a community. We have to worry about maintenance and all those other kinds of things, and maybe the future site of the fire station will benefit that. I don't know. It just feels weird to me in that respect. This property was clear-cut a few years ago, so all the open space that you have illustrated here, is that existing trees that are in existing blue lines that have not been disturbed as a result of that clear-cutting?
That's my understanding, yes.
So you won't require any more plantings to recreate what looks really beautiful on here? Will you have to do any sort of plantings in order to reestablish the vistas that have already been questioned because of the amount of clear cutting that has been done on this property?
That's a fair question that we haven't explored. Of course, the town has a new LDO that has tree replacement standards and things like that.
If you're
in
cutting
place.
trees, but if they've already been cut.
Correct. So there's, I can't say for certain what, I know that we base that on, we base those tree cover illustrations based on aerials and what's currently out there. We think that closely mirrors, but is that a thick forest? I can't say for certain.
I'd really be interested in understanding how much of this open space that you have here is actually existing versus has been disturbed by the clear cutting that was done on that property.
I can tell you that at least, that's the good thing about clear cutting that's been done, fairly recently, is there's requirements in place to protect the blue lines because,
Right.
yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see an overlay of what it looks like now versus what is happening here to understand how much you're going to have to replant, and then how long is that going to take to reestablish before it's something that's nice to look at, So that would be interesting to understand as well. There's the one cemetery that's in this property as well. So how is maintenance going to be managed? How is access to it going to be managed? And what kinds of concerns are there at all with the HOA and things of that nature?
So the cemetery is on a plot of land that is not part of this application.
Right,
So
exactly.
what we've done is we've routed the internal streets so that it's nearby. We have provided some open space around that. We anticipate, once we get into surveying the property in a little more detail, is we want to ascertain the exact limits of that cemetery. We are not planning to do anything to disturb anything that's there. Again, there'll be a public road that is nearby should someone want to go there and visit. But we don't have any plans to do anything within the confines of that cemetery, including if, and I'll say this, including, again, understanding where the limits of that might be.
Will there be some sort of easement in place to grant access so that there's no concerns about trespassing?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, that would be through an HOA property there,
Right.
so it's commonly owned through the neighborhood, but yes, that would be provided.
One more question about street, well, two questions about street, one question about streets and one about traffic. In other properties that have been approved by the town in the last couple years, developers have bridged the gap between areas of road improvements. There's 3 gaps there's 2 gaps in Burlington Mills and 1 in Forestville Road. Have there been discussions with those property owners as to whether or not you would continue those road improvements to span those gaps for the sake of continuity?
So the specific design details of those improvements have not, we haven't gone through that process
Right.
yet. But the developer is working and committed to working with the adjacent property owners on how to construct the requirements and also add some benefit, improve on existing conditions. So there may be that connection. DOT doesn't typically like to see that accordion look,
Right.
between turn lanes and that sort of thing. So if allowed, that might be the route that we get to go down.
Okay, it would be nice to have some continuity across this development for those gaps, so that you don't have, a nice part of road that's handling traffic the way the studies are suggesting they should, and then these gaps where you can't.
Right,
So-
and the frontage widening would not be the continuous section, it would just be a 3-lane section kind of connecting the left turn lanes that are required at the driveways.
Okay.
So they're considering, that's not a commitment yet, because we haven't gone through that design process with DOT, we haven't looked at the right-of-way required, but that's an option for sure.
My last question regarding traffic is relative to what I feel seems to be a lack of access to Forestville Road. When you really zoom out on these maps, you can really easily see how vital Forestville Road is to this community to access the 401 when going toward Raleigh. And if there's only one exit, there's only one entrance for 600 homes to get onto Forestville Road, I'm looking at this, I'm like, how do people in the north part of this community, the far east community, how are they're gonna have to drive all the way through the neighborhood to get to Forestville Road, to get to Raleigh in a reasonable way. Otherwise, they're gonna come all the way down Burlington Mills Road into town. We already have that problem with Rogers Road. Rogers Road basically dead ends at Rollsville. So everybody from basically Forestville and Rollsville, over by the Harris Teeter and all those homes in between, come our way, clutter our traffic just to get down to the 401. So that's a big concern about what is this community going to do to get to the 401 to head south on Raleigh. Have you guys been able to have any conversations with any of those homeowners along the east side of Forestville Road about getting an entrance all the way up at the north?
Speak to
I can
that.
answer that part, and then I'll let Brittany talk about the traffic. But no, we do not have, nor have we secured, rights to purchase any of those properties, if I'm understanding you, up in this portion of the site for access there. We have, members of our team have met with these landowners here, and we're trying to work together with them on, some solutions there that will assist them. And I'll let Brittany go back to the traffic.
I have a question about this traffic study also, when you finish, I want to ask.
The proposed site driveway will be signalized once the
Right.
volumes support that.
How many cars will that intersection stack into the neighborhood?
Matt, I'll let Matt speak to the specifics of
Okay,
the
okay.
traffic study results on that.
Good evening. My name is Matt Peach with Stantec Consulting Services. Happy to be here this evening to answer any questions you have on the TIA, how we produced the TIA, and any of the results. So if I heard correctly, the question was how many cars into the neighborhood at the access at Forestville Road does that currently stack? So if you give me a moment.
And will that turn lane actually be there? Normally, those turn lanes are only a couple cars, and then it narrows back down. So that turn lane, how many cars can that turn lane stack? The left turn lane specifically.
The left turn lane coming out of the site?
Coming out of the site onto Rollsville Road, how many cars will that left turn lane stack? Sorry, Forestville, what did I say? Rollsville? Sorry. I was thinking of Callis Falls, which is, sorry. Thank you.
Let's see. All right. So for the westbound approach, for the left turning traffic, at most, we saw 169 feet That was the maximum we observed in the traffic study coming out of the subdivision there, given that a traffic signal is installed. So when a traffic signal is installed, it's 169 feet. Your average passenger car is going to be around 25 feet. So that's a little bit less than 8. It's about 7 cars.
Okay. And based on, I think saw the number was like 5,000 units or 5,000 vehicles. So is that spread leaving both sides of this neighborhood, or how is that divided between which access points?
Yeah, that's correct. We're imagining traffic is going to, want to use Burlington Mills Road as well as Forestville, but I think your intuition in saying that most of the traffic we believe is going to use Forestville is correct, and that's how we analyzed it in the study. Yeah.
So on the study, I read the peak hours were like 7 to 9 and 4 to 6. So I'm struggling with the 4 to 6 because right down on Burlington Mills, this is Forestville and Burlington Mills, you have the middle school, and the buses haven't been running. So we got cars backed up all the way, all over. If you go down Forestville, you've got the high school. If you go down Burlington Mill the other way, you've got the charter school. You've got a daycare center. The traffic starts about 2:30, and it doesn't let up. And there's some folks in the audience that live near there that maybe could give us some better insight. But we're studying what we call peak, and I think the peak is a much bigger window in this spot than what we're looking at because of what's there and those, and that's my access to go home. And those times of day, sometimes it's just a constant stream. And it doesn't change at 4 o'clock from 2:30. So, is that a DOT thing to use 4 to 6, or what's the,
So 4 to 6 is the industry standard. That's a NCDOT thing. It's also in the LDO. For residential subdivisions like this, that is when the most traffic is being generated. Schools definitely generate a lot of traffic, but during the times at which we would expect the most traffic to be generated by residential development.
That's the minimum standard if it's the DOT standard. It's not the best practice. It's just the minimum standard to use that. We got a traffic jam that everybody and the commissioners keep telling us we're tired of hearing people complaining about the traffic. We're not using best practice. We're using, the DOT would be the minimum, correct?
Well, it's what's required, right?
That'd be the minimum.
It's also what's required by the LDO, but you're correct in both instances. Yeah.
That's all I had.
Yeah.
I think they
I yield back.
Okay. I think we're ready to, if there are comments from the public, in addition to questions or issues that have been raised here, I would ask that anybody, any speakers, please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less in the interest of trying to get everybody out of here somewhat reasonable time. I believe it's sign on the sheet there, and we need you to state your name and address. So anybody who wishes to speak.
Ann Keith, 4244 Burlington Mills Road, and I am the property owner that's bordered on 3 sides. The land that's being developed was my granddaddy's land. There is rock. There will be blasting. We had to use subsoilers to even farm the land. My question and my concern, number one, is the privacy. Right now, the Wall Cemetery, they are coming through my property, which I have allowed, to do whatever to the cemetery. So it is a concern that they will allow and give easement for them to go to the cemetery for whatever reason. The privacy part, we've got the soft trails right behind my property. I've got a big barn with storage with valuables in it. I'm asking for some type of wall or not just a berm with trees. But I need some privacy back there on the property. And it needs to go all the way down to my nephew's property, which is the Huntington Ridge or Huntington Creek and the entrance there. On top of that, and they are aware, I have a well, a private well that is 50 yards from the property line. I guess my legal rights and my concern, what if they hit a water vein and I have no water pressure, decreased water pressure? I don't want to go on City of Raleigh water. That is a concern. Another concern I have is the right turn only and the entrance into the subdivision, what is going to be the fire department. There is only 5 acres, which is the home place there, and you've only got a right turn, which means that you are going to put more traffic down through Burlington Mills. You're going to put more traffic by the school, by the daycare, that type. And it's really close to the one that is across from Centaur Road. I would like to see only 2 entrance exits on Burlington Mills Road. Now, I know this is definitely not what is laid out, but my concern is the other houses, and I've got family and relatives on the other side of the road. And one other thing, and I know my 3 minutes is probably getting close. The traffic study at Burlington Mill and Forestville. I agree there needs to be a longer storage lane, or whatever you want to call it, the turn lane. But we need dedicated persons or stoplights for left turn. Right now, the way it sits, if you're going toward number 1, the turn lane to go toward Heritage High School has to wait for all of that traffic to clear. If you can get dedicated left turn signals all 4 ways, that will clear some traffic to get the traffic to flow. There does not need to be, in my opinion, and we know what that's worth sometimes, the right turn lane going toward Heritage High School. You've got a complete long stretch, and the people that are going to turn right, I would not want to turn right with the traffic coming up Forestville Road. You've got teenagers go to Bojangles from Heritage every day, and it's like a racetrack. I don't think the right turn lane going toward Heritage High School is necessary. Plus, it's an encroachment on business property. Thank you.
And having led into that, my name is Kelly Jennings, and I am a resident in what is, I guess, the northeast quadrant of the intersection of Burlington Mills and Forestville Road, where Ann was just speaking of. And 3901 Burlington Mills Road. Yeah. And my primary concerns, in addition to some of the other questions that have been raised tonight and at other times, lies primarily with the level of off-site commitments we'll have for the improvements that are being called on for that intersection. Not only do I own and operate a business there that's been, we're approaching 20 years in March, so I've committed both my life and, home and property to building that in this community. We live there. We have lived there between my parents and grandparents in the area of that intersection for my life of 50 years. My father, who was 75, and my grandfather before him, all residents and along that road. And I know that the impact that a dedicated right turn lane will have on all of us there, with the current setbacks that my property currently has, you know, obviously, access is a major concern, not just for me, you know, living there. It's my home. It's our home. It's my business, you know, and maintaining a level of safe access both for me and my husband to our home, as well as customers for parking. In 2011, when Rollsville Middle School was built, we went through, at that point, the intersection going from a four-way stop to signalization and a dedicated center turn lane and all four approaches. And the lesson, if there's been one, and there's been many that I've learned from that, is if we can't get out ahead and know with certainty what the plan is, then we don't have any recourse or anything, you know, any concerns that we had. We had stormwater management issues. We've had, you know, we have to do grading on a continual basis because of, you know, some of the runoff that we experienced from the way that that road was put in at that time. We sit, most of you have probably been through that intersection and know that we sit, I'd say easily 5 feet below grade level of the road as it stands. And when they put the new improvements to the intersection back then, the incline for exiting our property onto Burlington Mills, you know, the small apron that we had there and a gravel parking lot, I mean, people are constantly, you know, rear-wheel drive vehicles are spinning to get out onto the road safely, and you can't take it slow. You have to get out and get on your way because of the amount of traffic that's there. So my concerns are, you know, with the setbacks that we've got now, how are we going to, you know, ensure that we have safe access to our property, you know, both from a living standpoint and from a business standpoint? You know, I mean, we experienced, you know, of course, loss of income. You know, people avoid areas when that kind of work is going on. You know, that's a concern. I have had some outreach, and I have spoken, you know, with Jacob Anderson about, you know, some of the things that may entail. But I ask you that ahead of a project of this scope and of this magnitude that stands to change not only the landscape of the community we love, but with the, you know, the traffic impacts. And nobody's talked about schools. I mean, where are the kids going to go to school? I mean, a lot of schools in our area, they're at capacity now, you know, and with traffic, you know, when buses are running, they're not riding them. Everybody, it's carpool, and there's cars, you know, lined up in all directions, you know, from the intersection in question with people getting to and from school. And I just think that there's a lot of things that need to be considered ahead of this project, you know, and with a certainty and a knowing that some of the major concerns, in particular, you know, I was notified, December 6th was when I was notified of this plan, this proposal, this zoning change. And I think the most serious, what I would call travesty in that is that if you even read, like, in the traffic study, one of the conclusions, it says, you know, with the results presented indicate the proposed development will have an impact on the surrounding roadway network. These impacts are most pronounced at the intersection of Burlington Mills Road and Forestville Road. You know, and it's like, so with the knowledge that you've got two businesses, one of which has been there for probably 100 years on one side of the street. I've been there and devoted my life to 20 years on the other side. We stand to be the most impacted, and I would say in some ways the most negatively impacted, even more so than adjacent property owners. And there's no necessary outreach, you know, and that's probably a policy issue that needs to change. You know, that if I had known, you know, it's already impacted me in a negative way. We've got 5 days to Christmas. I own a retail store, and I've spent the last 2 weeks with my brain trying to wrap around going through agenda packets and reading where I stand to be affected by this when I should be in my store taking care of customers. And here I am tonight. So I just ask for, you know, I don't know what the process is. I don't have the luxury of either a team or, you know, people doing the analysis for me or telling me exactly what steps to take, but I would ask that there be some considerations for some contingencies or conditions that show me and other people, hey, this is how you're going to be affected potentially by this. This is what we intend to do. This is what it's going to look like. This is where you will access your property. This is where your customers will park. This is how this is going to happen, not just this needs to be done and we're going to figure it out, you know, because, you know, I just don't want to lose the opportunity to have either a say or, you know, a voice in it and stand to lose everything that that I've built personally in this community over the past 20 years, and all the people that I think, that are here tonight, they share a lot of the same concerns in various ways. And I know there's a lot more, but I know that's more than my 3 minutes, but thank you for hearing me out on some of those, and I'd be glad to either, answer any questions or, express other concerns whether to the board or by email, but there are lots of other things that I think need to be addressed in addition to what we've seen tonight. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any others?
Hi, my name is Amy Bonus, and I live at 11316 Centaur Road in Wake Forest. I'm a mortgage banker. I've been a mortgage banker for almost 30 years, and I'm very familiar with Toll Brothers. You guys do a great job. I love the house that you build, and you build really nice developments. And if we don't develop, then the development is going to come in around us. And so also when we have traffic problems, traffic is a symptom of success. But it's our responsibility to continue our community, our beautiful community that we have here, that my husband and I live on Centaur Road. We own a farm there, and we're right across the street from this proposed Tom's Creek, and we would love to sit down with the developer and talk to them a little bit further about our concerns and input. So we do want the development. We just want to develop it responsibly and productively for our town. And to me, that means that, and to many people, that means that the density of this project is too much. There's too many homes being built. And when you look at this development and you look at the amount of undevelopable land in it, it's about 90 acres. And so the open space reflects what cannot be developed. So all I'm asking is that, and the comps support this, you guys, from the appraisal point of view, and I'm sorry to turn away from you, but from the appraisal point of view, Toll Brothers, just so you know, there's lots of comps that support higher price homes here. And there's lots of people that come to me in the mortgage business that say, Amy, all I want to do is buy a piece of land. I just want to buy a house that's not a postage stamp, that's not, right next to another person, like we're saying here, like Steve Hill was saying, and what David was saying, Davis, is that right? Davian was saying, that is not like right next to my neighbor. Like I just can't like throw a stone and like that I have a little privacy. So I wonder if you guys can maybe sort of redesign this to have bigger lots and charge more money for the homes, which I think you can get because we are in a thriving real estate market. So that's all I have to say. Thank you. And here's our information. And if you need a good lender.
How you doing? I'm Dan Jennings. I'm Kelly's husband. My affiliation, I live 3901 Burlington Mills as well. And Kelly hit on a lot of points that we've dealt with in the past. And we know as progress happens, if you're not ahead of it, I spent a lot of time meeting with DOT, getting us to where we are now, and it just doesn't go well. I mean, our biggest fight is we don't want to be collateral damage. There's no better words for it. And when development like this goes on, I mean, I heard the plan they just said. I mean, that road, where's that property, where's that going to come from? How are you going to make that road that big? Not only am I married to Kelly with our business and our home there, I'm a partner in the market across the street. I have a vested interest in that as well. So I need to see a better plan and a little bit better description of everything that you were telling me about where all this property is going to come from. The last one, they just came in and took our property. And that's the only way to put it. DOT came in and took our property. They took out our buffers, took out our gardens, raised the road above where we are. I have connections in construction, fortunately, but it's a constant battle for us with erosion. A lot of Steve's points made are legitimate points about the houses being close by. You put that pretty sod in, but I've seen it. I've been in the landscape business as well. That all dies off, and that water's got to go somewhere. So, I mean, everything they said, we just need a little bit more consideration, a little bit more. Why we found out about this so late in the project that nobody showed us the courtesy to say, hey, we're getting ready to do this, and it's going to impact you. We're going to probably need some more of your land, and we're going to possibly, have to take the store out on the left, and you will be affected. That project, how long do you think that'll take? 6 months? That's 6 months that people cannot get into Kelly's business. What are we supposed to do? Can I get out of my driveways for 6 months, or do we have to move during the road project? Somebody's got to at least let us know. I mean, I can't see how we can possibly live there during a project like that. So, anyways, just a little bit more consideration, we'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Najla Carlton. I live at 4909 Tuckahoe Trace. I'll be brief. I have 3 points, and they pale in consideration what they've just said. In Tuckahoe, we've expressed in both the June meeting and in the December meeting concern over our well water. In the June meeting, they didn't even understand we had wells, a community well. So would it be feasible, I'd like to ask, would Toll Brothers commit to doing a flow and sedimentation test now and when we're further into the project if we proceed, if the project proceeds? Secondly, I don't know where annexation fits in. We're between here and this development. So what does that mean related to the homes that are located between here and this development? And thirdly, my main concern is for those 2 businesses that have been, a part of this community for decades. And as you know, very busy on that corner. I mean, a lot of people from Heritage and all over the area utilize both of those businesses. So that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir Powers, thanks so much to answer that annexation question, because that's more of a legal response. The annexation, there's no forced annexation in North Carolina anymore. So it's the property owners themselves who have to vote on it. So put one away.
Okay, thanks.
Hello, I'm Renee Edens. I have a rental house at 3913 Burlington Mills Road, and I'll include my father's. His property where he lives is next door, and I'm very concerned about the stormwater management. Currently at 3913, as a result of the last road project, when it rains and rains really hard, the water that flows down the side of Burlington Mills Road now, a lot of it winds up in our driveway. And it's a constant battle to keep it out, to keep dirt, to keep gravel, to keep, it's a safety issue. And I would like to know ahead of time what's gonna be done to make it better than it is now, because we can't stand for it to be any worse. It affects my property, it affects my father's at 3905, and neither one of us are very excited about having any land taken from us. It's already happened one time, and it's definitely a sore spot for us. Regarding my sister Kelly, her store employs people in our neighborhood, and when it affects her business and her livelihood, it also affects others that work at that location, as well as the market across the street. So that's something to be considered. I mean, it affects many lives in many different ways. So we would definitely like to be a part of any plans moving forward, to have discussions. I mean, communication is key. And if we all know about it, it's much better than getting a surprise 2 weeks before, before Christmas that all this has taken place. And we all are here, less than a week away from Christmas. So communication is going to be key, and we're not hard to get along with. We just want to be involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, board. Discussion, additional questions?
I had a couple of different additional questions, and they may be more directed at the traffic engineers about the road widening at the Burlington Mills and Forestville Road intersection. Do you anticipate, or how much additional right-of-way would you anticipate, if any, at those intersections?
We have to have more space.
Again, the design has not gone through that process yet. We did a conceptual layout to kind of get a gauge of the right-of-way impacts, and there it appears to be some right-of-way that would be needed on the northeast quadrant, where the Harvest Moon is located, and I believe it was limited to that.
Okay. But you're not aware of how much you would need at this point in time?
Yeah, it was very preliminary layout based on GIS lines and that sort of thing, so.
Okay, thank you.
Meredith, do you know if DOT has had a relatively recent look at that intersection? I vaguely remember hearing something about Forestville Road and latest transportation, five-year transportation plan, but I can't remember if it was that Forestville was on it or off it, or...
I am not sure. I'm happy to look into that and get that information prior to the next step in this process.
Okay.
Meredith, while you're there, this may be a question for you as well. The 6 acres of the open space is to be dedicated to the town. Did that come as a recommendation from Parks and Greenway that they wanted that acreage, or is this just offered up by the developer?
I am fairly certain it came from a comment from a technical review committee from our Parks and Recreation staff.
Okay,
So it's an interest and a desire, yes.
okay, thank you.
I've got a question for Jeff from Toll. So if I heard correctly, you said you wanted to work with staff and the board and the community, correct? Are you willing to tonight or at some point to commit where some of these folks ask about fencing or screening or whatnot? Are you willing to also potentially move up from one phase to make, like one of the open-ended things here is studying this traffic light on Forestville Road, to making that happen earlier in the project? Or is Toll willing to do any of that up front, or not necessarily at phase 1, but say instead of 100 at 350 or 300, that it's got to be done by then, instead of waiting and doing a study and talking about it? We know it's going to need something at some point in time.
Yeah.
It is, because I give you something. I've lived here 35 years, and I lived on Burlington Mill on the other side. And when Heritage came in, was Marshall Stroud's Dairy. Forestville Road, for those that don't know it, cut right through the high school, cut right through the middle school, comes up through the dairy barn, and it came out of Hoy Auction. So they built and straightened out Rogers Road and did all that. Well, I lived in Deer Chase. Well, it added 2 miles for me to go to Wake Forest. Not a big deal, but it made all of a sudden my little cut through there. And I'm going to apologize to all the traffic engineers, but somebody at that point, right at Heritage, at Rogers Road and Forestville/Heritage Lake Road, has an intersection that doesn't have enough storage capacity. And anybody that goes through that and knows what I'm talking about, where the Chick-fil-A is, that there's no storage capacity. Is Toll willing to take and just say, you know what, I'm going to do the minimum standards, but you know what, we're really willing to give you some best practices. I'm going to add 25% to our storage. You know, that's, I think, you know, would give to some of these people in the community for your density, or you need to back the density down, because I don't think we're going to achieve it. Because I think when y'all are done in 2029, one of these does say that there will be loss of service on this thing, that nobody wants that. You know, is Toll willing to do any of those things, you know, give a pound of flesh, if you will?
We are. What those numbers are, I can't stand right here and tell you, and I don't think anybody on the board can. I'm not even sure our engineers can, to say it's 25%, it's 30%. I don't know that I have the background to say that we can definitively say it's 25% on the storage. I, you know, might ask the engineers where in the study the signal comes along. I can tell you that, I mean, I've been taking notes of everybody that spoke at any of these public meetings. We've been cataloging those things as a team, and the way we've been able to respond to them is how we came to this meeting tonight, was that we heard those concerns, we came back because we had time to think about it and look at it and see what was a best practice. I can't stand here right now and just, and tell you what those things are, other than we are willing to commit to continue to work with the landowners. We are building a subdivision here that is going to also, you know, hopefully enjoy going to those businesses. We don't want to come in and start to adversely affect the neighbors. We really don't. But again, I don't want to stand here and sort of negotiate, you know, at the lectern, other than just to tell you, yes, we are committed to continuing to study those things. There's a period of time between now and I think you mentioned the council or the commissioners meeting is the 7th. So again, that gives us more time to look into these things, to understand these concerns in greater detail.
Are you willing to take it and go back and bring back another proposal in front of the group? Or is it strictly we'll go in front of the committee? So yes or no?
I mean, what would you like to see? I mean, I don't, you know,
If I may quickly just ask, I think for clarification, what I'd like to make sure I understand is that there is no plan or design for Forestville and Burlington Mills intersection. There's nothing there. Is that correct?
Can you,
There's no plan for or design for how that has to change in order to accommodate not just this particular project, but the future of the next 5 years in 2029 when it's done and anything else increases in the area?
I mean, we looked at the future year scenario of when this development is being built and the capacity at the intersection, that's what the right turn lanes were
Right, but there's no
required.
design for everybody to understand what's going to be impacted specifically related to properties at that intersection.
Just the conceptual designs, I don't know if those have been shown to any neighbors at this point or not.
Yeah, I mean,
But-
that's just my biggest concern. As I've been watching developments come in for the last several years, it's fascinating to see everything always being concerned about what we see for that project and not what gets impacted, and whether or not NCDOT is on file with us, is on the same page as us, and is it going to coincide with the completion of this project versus that? And I'm obviously very new to this board, so I have a lot to learn, but that's just the one thing that I'm very hesitant to really understand here is you have a project with this kind of an impact, and we only see what's happening right here. We don't get to see what's happening elsewhere, and I think that's where a lot of the concerns I have are with these kinds of plans when we don't see what other kind of impacts are going to be addressed in the same time that these are going to be impacting.
Yeah, you know, our roadway design engineer is not with us tonight, but it's a very tedious process,
Right.
you know, between
Understood.
DOT and the town and adjacent property owners to figure out, again, how to construct those improvements that are required for capacity, but also, again, you know, Toll Brothers is committed to really enhancing from what it is today. And again, I don't know if you can speak to specifically for the Harvest Moon parcel. I think we talked about lighting and landscaping and something that we can do to make it an
And I
improvement.
don't doubt that. Don't get me wrong. I don't doubt that. You know, I just think it's possible. I mean, we've seen what's happened with Main Street and Walbrook and Cobblestone and all the cooperation that's happening there with the state. I just feel like even though these aren't directly connected, I still think there's an opportunity to figure something out before it gets worse. And that's just how. It's the same thing on Everett Road and 98. You know, that whole road out there is like a Class F. And the project that's out there bringing up to a Class C, and the developer's like, hey, we're doing you a favor. But you're really not. And that's kind of what I think we're talking about here is there is a bare minimum, which is the requirement, but sometimes we need a little bit more, and I think that's what I feel we're missing a little bit of without seeing what's going to happen to that intersection.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, another point to make is it's not necessarily a bare minimum. You know, all the parameters that go into a traffic study are very conservative. We look at the maximum queue length,
Right.
and that's what we determine our storage on. And then DOT adds another 50 feet of full width for a deceleration length, so that it's not a minimum that we design.
Well, and I don't mean to say it that way, but I mean, you know, if you only are required a C to pass high school math, that's the minimum. That's the requirement, but it is the minimum. But
Yeah.
good students go above and beyond and work hard to get that A and the B. So I don't mean to minimize the statement of being at, you know, a minimum, but that's just what concerns me.
Jeff, the lady from Tuckahoe who mentioned the flow and sediment, I mean, that's a real, they do depend on wells. And I had a conversation with another resident in there who, when the middle school was being built and they did some dynamiting, it affected her well. So it's a real deal in there. Are you willing to do the flow and sediment? I know you said you didn't want to negotiate, but is Toll willing to do a flow and sediment test on 100 houses?
Absolutely. The other thing I was going to offer, and I'm going to turn to Meredith and ask a logistical question here, but so one of the things we've talked about is we're at sort of a conceptual level. We've got hand-drawn plans, but we're trying to tease out some more detail. And we're telling you know, that's part of the process, if you will. But as I understand it, and someone please correct me if I'm wrong, the next step is a preliminary subdivision plan, assuming the zoning is approved, and then we go on to CDs. Is it my understanding that the preliminary does not come back to the planning board? Is that correct?
That's correct. The preliminary subdivision plat is administrative.
Can we offer to bring you back those plans as they are developed and we have the ability to, you know, one of the things that, to really solve the problem at the intersection there, you know, right now we look on this map here and we see property lines, but those aren't real property lines. Those are GIS lines. But what we need to do is go out and do survey, right? And so we know where the right-of-way is. We know where the slopes are. We know where the water's going. I mean, these are very detailed engineering studies, but those things can happen during the preliminary subdivision phase. Is that something that is a discussion point that you would, again, I'm going to kind of lean on some other folks here to tell me if we're in logistical waters that don't work, but that would give this group the opportunity to review those things, have, again, an approval of that, you know, once we can more confidently state this is what's happening. Because, again, you know, the right-of-way lines and everything, again, shown on this map are GIS. There's an inherent looseness to them. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm trying to address your concern about developing detailed information, but knowing where we are in the process and how that information normally gets developed, there's a little bit of a disconnect. So I'm trying to bring those two together so that see if there's an
If I understand what you're saying, though, if God forbid something were to happen and that doesn't work out, then we're stuck with rezone, something that we agreed to rezone in this particular format, which may not be something that really fits because of the density, right? Okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood what you're
We've
asking.
had people at this stage already bringing us not just concepts, but more detailed
Yeah.
plans.
If you had another month to look into the issues that were brought up tonight and maybe get a better idea where some of those right-of-way lines are currently sitting, would you be able to put that to some good use?
We can do our best. Again, you know, we can certainly look at it in greater detail. It'll give us time to talk to the neighbors if that's what the board would like us to do. Again, you're asking, I think there was a question to me, but again, we're here to sort of take advice from the board, from the commissioners, et cetera. That's how we've sort of navigated our way to this process. That's why we went to the December 6th meeting and requested that the project be remanded back to this group. And so we're going to have to take some cues from the board here as to how we navigate this, if that makes sense. So I'm not saying, I know it's a long-winded answer, but in 30 days, you know, we've got Christmas in there. We can do our best to try to get you some more detailed information, sure.
Well, the reason why I'm throwing it out there is it's been a number of years, but in the past, this board has tabled a case, you know, somewhat like this, to give the petitioner more time to work out some more details without making a recommendation, either shooting it down or sending it on to the town board when this board might not feel that it's quite ready. And, you know, that would be up, of course, up to the board.
I would entertain that.
But
I would entertain that, but I feel like we got to address the traffic or we got to reduce the density because I'm not sold that it's a cluster subdivision. I heard some, you know, talk around. I read a urban planning a book on cluster paper, a white paper from the Urban Forest Council of North Carolina. And your description doesn't kind of meet it. You haven't convinced me, and it hasn't. I go back to that picture and I think of Sesame Street. I mean, some of y'all probably remember that. And they had this little ditty, which one of these things is not like the other? And when I look at, I don't know if somebody remembers that, but anyway, when I look at Meredith's
Going in my
picture
head right now.
and I look at yours, it doesn't
Yeah.
really,
Well,
you know, give me
we're-
the same thing. So-
Sure.
So
Respectfully, we're never going to have circular clusters surrounded by, I mean, it's just, that wouldn't even meet connectivity requirements and street section requirements. And it's just, you know, that's a very basic understanding of what a cluster, the whole point of a cluster is you have a cluster of development area surrounded by area that's either in private or active open space. So, you know,
there's not a lot of that. It's just one big piece or two in the middle with some undevelopable areas around it. And so I'm struggling. So I haven't been convinced that we're clustered. So
Sure.
if we're going to say it's cluster and everybody and my colleagues up here and
So-
whatever say that it's cluster in the planning board, I'm going to accept that.
Sure.
But I'd like to see the traffic less mitigated if we're going to do that.
Chairman, just a question, I think might be for Meredith. Is there a zoning difference between a cluster and a medium density, or is just cluster a word? So if they went for a medium density zone and called it a bob, for lack of a better word, is it the same density that we're talking about for a cluster, or does it change because they're saying it's a cluster?
In residential medium, the by right density is 3 units per acre for a single-family detached lot. If you go with the cluster option for residential medium, you can reduce the lot size to 5,000 square feet, and you can have density between 3 to 5 units per acre. So in the traditional definition of cluster, you have the same
So this is really
number
just
of
changing
lots,
the
but
lot
it's a smaller lot with the 40% open space requirement.
Because their minimum is 2.7 would meet the medium density, but it's a lot size question.
Right, the density is actually less than our standard for medium density.
This
But
is
the
really
lot lot size
very
looks,
core-
feels,
the
it
very
looks
core
like
of
something
the
else.
Cluster just says that you can do a 5,000 square foot density, or square foot lot. The rest of the, from a density standpoint, if they built it like traditional homes at 2.7, you would still meet the medium density requirement. So it's really just lots, going below our lot size minimum for the most part, which.
It's
I know
below the
board
regular one.
voted on a while back. Didn't we vote on a number, and actually the board said, no, we want it higher?
Back in 2020,
Voted on
we voted on,
6,000 and it was
I think it
9.
was 8.
They went to 8 or 9,
Can't remember now.
I think they went to-
I don't remember
I think they went to 10.
because the desire was to make sure that there was minimums
Right.
across the board.
I cer-
That's the question really is, to me, right, is throwing away the term cluster for a second, really you're asking for is I want to make smaller lots than we normally would allow. It's a density question, right? Sorry, it's not a density question because 2.7 meets the median density requirement, which we've said we're good with. But we're not happy with the fact that you're going to a lot size that brings your houses together in a manner that do things that fall outside. Look, and I appreciate the look very much because I didn't get this at all. Like, not even a little bit what you say cluster, didn't quite grasp it. Saw the look of the houses, saw looks like, okay, that's actually not bad, I understand it. But I definitely understand the concerns around water runoff. The concerns around the density of the lot sizes, right? Not necessarily the houses, but the lot sizes. And the board will tell you there's nobody more sympathetic to traffic than me because I live by Roseland High School. And dealing with the DOT is, I'd rather have my teeth pulled. Again, and it's a problem. And I appreciate also that you're willing to make these things in advance, like moving things up, which is definitely not what we've seen historically, right? A lot of times is we'll build it, and then when we're halfway through, we'll come and build it. So I appreciate a lot of the work here. But given where we're at in the lot size, and given where I've seen the board is, I would not vote for this as is without some more work around understanding how that's gonna lay out from a water runoff standpoint and what the traffic looks like. That's my opinion.
Jim, about the cluster, I was on the UDO board that rewrote the ordinance, I think, with Davion. And way I remember, one of the big concerns with the cluster, or the reason for allowing it, was that the board felt like there wasn't enough open space being dedicated by the subdivisions. And that was a concession to get more open space, was to allow the cluster. And I think this is achieving that by that point, because it is 40%. And I don't think the UDO defines that how usable it has to be. Because, I mean, it does have active and passive allowed.
I think it's parts, right? And it's the hybrid, right? I can see a lot of the sizes or the lots, you're like, hey, you got a nice open spot, right? These are nice. And then you've got that dense core in a couple areas that the sight line for the house is the alleyway or the house in front of me or the house next to me, right? So where you were going is 100%, like you can see some of those spots, it's very nice. You can go dense house, but you got a lot of open area behind it. So the housing is close together, but there's a lot of open right behind it. But there's core pieces inside of that to me, just, it's a big cluster, right? It brings it all together and jams into a bunch of homes in one spot. Most of
It
it's
doesn't tell you
not
how
bad.
to cluster.
I mean, I see it, I see the definition of a cluster subdivision.
I'd like to make just one point that's thrown out here, and perhaps it's just a minor point, but it's been said several times. Oh, of course, you know, the open space you're providing is undeveloped land. That's not true. We're providing 90 acres of open space. I did a takeoff on it. Undevelopable land, truly what's in floodplain where you would not be able to develop is about 50 acres. So there isn't an additional 40 acres that are going to open space. I just want to make that point so that you know that that is not a correct statement if you try to say the open space that's being dedicated is undevelopable.
The blue line stream that's coming up, the Y from there,
Yeah, I took all the buffer area, all the floodplain area, and I totaled it all up, and it comes out to about 50 acres, and we're offering about 90 acres of open space.
and
That's
13 of
assuming-
them are in the other.
That's assuming the blue lines stand up when they start really doing the engineering.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, the blue lines on the county map are, it's probably better than what you see on EPA's maps or Geological Survey's maps, but still, you know, sometimes it's just, from aerial photograph, that looks like that might be a stream bed.
Yeah, so this has been delineated. I mean, we had an environmental consultant that was hired to delineate it. So what you're seeing on the plans is what was recently delineated. And the buffers are the required buffers.
So how much of that developable land is now turned into BMPs and other sorts of management, storm management resources?
Well, so the SEMs would be outside of the SEMs are in the developable area, So the 50 acres is, the 50 acres is undevelopable and do not include the SEMs.
I'll go back to my earlier statement. These type of rear load product particularly, if you take a Suburban or a four-door pickup truck, the driveways and stuff that are engineered, they don't work. So that's another area that ends up between the houses, it ends up almost being totally concrete. Or they put gravel or chalet stone or something between those spots on there. And the same with between those houses. You're going to lose a significant amount of water capture, and we've got stone under there. It's just a really dense site. Capturing all that's really critical, and it won't hold up. It just won't hold up with the side, with a little amount of light at 10 foot between those houses. That North Carolina's land of longleaf pine. There's no grass that lives here and does well. You got to battle at it. And these are the worst. These really tight spots.
Really quick to clarify the question you had about bringing the subdivision plan back, because that is administrative, even if you were to commit to that, this board doesn't really have the option to deny the approval there, or deny the approval there. So that would not unfortunately work, but thank you.
But they could, Meredith, so if we get by guide for staff could make those adjustments, right?
Yes, it is an administrative decision by staff.
But we could advise and guide the staff to their decision. We couldn't make them do one thing or another, but we could.
It is an administrative decision by staff. Yeah, it's an administrative.
I think the one thing I know there's been a lot of discussion, but it seems like this plan, there's a lot of discussion about the cluster, but I don't personally see that as being that big of an issue with the cluster and the lot sizes. That was my understanding of the intent of allowing the cluster development, was to get the smaller lots. And I feel like as long as that's in the UDO, it's something that has to be considered. If the commissioners and the board don't want it, then we need to look at changing the UDO. Other than that, this plan, as they presented it, it's meeting their future land use plan conditions, the community transportation plan conditions, and the greenway plan conditions. So they're hitting most of the targets, or I think all the targets that we've set out for them. I know there's still some questions about the additional right-of-way, but I think those are things that will be answered if this project were to take the next step, because it's going to be a lot more surveying and design and looking at some of those things. But I think as long as it's meeting those plans, it has to be at least given some consideration.
Where we go from there? To our town council, is it possible to table this matter?
Yes, you
Or
can.
we can vote on it tonight, to my colleagues?
I would make a motion to table this until the January meeting, until some additional details can be worked through staff and the developer.
You're making it an official motion?
Making an official motion, yes, sir.
We have a motion to table this to the January meeting.
Question on the motion?
Pardon?
Can I ask a question? On the
Sure,
motion?
definitely.
What is the expectation of the builder at that point? What do we expect to see when they come back? Do we have can we provide that to them?
Personally,
There was a couple that we just bang, bang, bang.
Yes, one in particular, I think, is the impact on the intersection of Forestville Road and Burlington Mills Road. some level of detailed drawings, investigation of the right-of-ways to understand what kind of impact a proper design for properly improving that intersection will have.
I would like to have the net and gross numbers for the park addressed in that on there, as well as the pond dam issue stated that it will be fixed. And then I'd love to see some in-commitment writing about evaluating these traffic, not just that intersection, but the stoplights and so forth, of moving those ideas up, not waiting till the end, being in there.
I think, you also had the question around the Greenway and how that connects.
Their response to my question was that they would do that. So as long as the Greenway is properly represented as requested as well on a revised plan, I think that's a minimal ask. So, but yes, that would be appreciated as well. Thank you.
Could I just add one clarifying question to this? I know y'all are in the middle of a motion, but.
No, that's fine.
So you mentioned the net and the gross for the park?
Yeah,
But
the statement about taking out the roadways and all that,
Yeah.
internally, it doesn't matter. If you're giving us the land, it's the town's
That's
to
fine.
do.
I just wanted to clarify
So-
that, because the true net, we won't know, y'all will know once you program it, but if you want us to say.
No less than.
No less than
6
6 acres net roadways, internal roadways, utility easements for the development.
All you're
that kind of
giving is
thing.
the deed to the land.
Yeah, that's right.
That's all you're doing. So it doesn't matter what's happening inside. Roseville may make it a nature park and not do anything with it, or it
right.
might be a community center.
right.
That's,
I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
One of the things that we're expecting to have them come back, right? We're asking them to come back, table.
Yeah.
So we should give them some specific
Right.
things to come
Agree.
back and address.
Yeah, I think they addressed the flow test, and I guess one thing they also was the notification to the resident. Some didn't get notified till December 6th, just 13 days ago, I guess, right? So I don't know where would that come in? Was that notification because they were more than 200 feet from the initial design?
That's correct, and we're actually discussing notification and cluster subdivisions at the January 3rd Town Board meeting.
Okay.
There's nothing else? I'll second the motion, if that's the case.
Nothing else?
We have a motion
Correct. As amended.
That's clear.
pending,
That's clarified.
pending additional information. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of tabling, please give me an aye. Aye. Are there any opposed?
Nay.
We have one opposed. The board has voted to table it until the January meeting.
Thank you all very much. Just want to say happy holidays, and we appreciate the continued positive, productive conversation. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Let's recess for 5 minutes. I've got 21:43, and it's kind of convenient that my very last meeting, I actually get to use the gavel for once. We are in recess.
Well, he's been waiting for 16 years to do that.
And we are, if you're ready? We are back from recess. Planning Board is back in session, which brings us to TA 22-02, an applicant-initiated text amendment for self-storage use.
Yes.
The floor is yours, sir.
Good evening, thank you. Again, Mike Ellebarger, Senior Planner in the Planning Department. Items B2 and B3 on your agenda are brought forth by the same applicant. We have separated the text amendment because that is a little different animal than the map amendment and annexation petition, which is B3 on the agenda. So I have a short presentation on the text amendment itself. Then we'll roll into the map amendment, and then we can do motions and consideration and questions, I think, at the end holistically. So some language here, sorry for the busy slide. Current LDO language or descriptions of the use of self-storage here. There is no standalone zoning use definition for self-service storage or otherwise termed as self-storage facilities. The LDO in the industrial light zoning use characteristics clause has this definition here, which ends with and self-service storage. The warehousing zoning use in its examples clause ends with self-storage facilities. So both uses define or describe self-service storage / facilities. So this is a duplication of information and a little complicated to administer it when there's two uses that both speak to the same, we can call it a sub-use or a more specific use under those two general headers of, again, industrial light or light industrial and warehousing. In the past, of course, the LDO was only adopted in June of 2021. It's only 1.5 years old. There have been 3 town-initiated text amendments brought forth, come through the Planning Board, adopted by the Town Board of Commissioners. So this is the first applicant-initiated text amendment being brought forth to the Planning Board. So what is self-storage? Here's one picture of what it could be. Oops, sorry. A top-down layout of a typical type of development. The colored buildings, of course, are the units. The surrounding areas are the access ways. Very typical type of single-story, garage door loaded, maybe conditioned, maybe not, use. And then what's a little bit newer in this industry is this type of completely indoor, internally accessed, conditioned space storage uses. So the LDO Section 5 use table, again, going through those two zoning uses, industrial light and warehousing, this is where those two uses are permitted. So there are some similarities or consistencies. The GI, General Commercial District, and then the BT, Business and Technical or Technology District. Both of these uses are permitted there by right. The warehousing use then in CH, Highway Commercial, would require a special use permit. And the way that the LDO Section 5 use tables are created is they start at the top, least intense uses, and build. And they're literally, industrial light comes before warehousing. So that tells us that warehousing is a more intense use. And then the Highway Commercial Zoning District, there actually is no land zoned that on the LDO zoning map, but it's there for a rezoning request by an applicant. So just for reference. So the two uses are basically synonymous by the zoning districts that are permitted, that permit it. And an analysis of the LDO and the development standards that apply to both industrial light and warehousing in the general industrial zoning district, they would produce the same standards. There's no outstanding or standout development standard that would differentiate the two. So for all intents and purposes, their development patterns and paths would be the same. Here, as is included in your packet, is the applicant's text amendment language. It is rather short and simple, to the point, striking the word self-storage facility from the warehousing use and then keeping it under the industrial. So the duplication of the two uses would be muted by this, and it would stay under the industrial light use. There are some cleanups here, oops, sorry, at the bottom. Two portions in Chapter 6, Site Design Standards. The applicant is proposing a unique to self-storage parking requirement of 1 per 100 units. Typically, you see these self-storage units, they don't have large parking lots because people do not park and walk to their unit. They go, drive up, self-serve themselves from the unit, and then depart. So a very unique type of land use in that regard. And then in 6.8.7.A5, the parking, this is about location of parking. So the standard was parking for industrial use buildings, which would capture self-storage, would be located to the side or the rear. The applicant is seeking to exclude the self-service storage from this side or rear driven requirement, meaning this use, self-storage, could put parking in front of the building or most typically between a street and the buildings. The summary here is the staff really does not have a recommendation on this. This is being initiated by the applicant to the town board to change the LDO. These changes do serve the product and the project that you're going to see in just a moment here in the map amendment. So the planning board ultimately can make a motion to approve the requested language, deny it, or come up with some maybe suggestions or other language that you're more comfortable with perhaps passing on to the town board. So now I'll move into the map amendment and annexation petition. So again, some property background here. The owner is Suzanne Ward. The applicant here of record is the Rivercrest Realty Investors. It's a 5.5 acre tract located, we'll get to location in just a second. The current zoning is the Wake County Industrial 1. So this property is currently under Wake County's planning and zoning and development jurisdiction. So annexing into the town of Rolesville, and then under the LDO, general industrial conditional zoning is the request. Oh, I'm sorry, that is a misnomer right there. That should be an I, not a C. I just noticed that. This application is coming forth with conditions of approval proposed and a concept plan. The graphic here is from 2021 annexation area agreement between the town of Rolesville and the town of Wake Forest. And this gray line indicates the new boundary for whose jurisdiction applies to these properties. Our subject lot is right here, which again, we'll do location here in just a second. So this line being here, it is now in the town of Rolesville's development and annexation potential area. It was until this agreement in 2021 in Wake Forest's jurisdiction. Sorry, there's the area. Vicinity map here, if you're familiar with Jones Dairy Elementary School here on the south-ish side of Jones Dairy Road, it is this tract that is currently tree covered, and some of the existing subdivision neighborhoods and larger residential lots in the vicinity. So again, the existing zoning of this is Wake County's Industrial 1 I district. The adjacent property to its east, we'll call it, is also that I-1. The elementary school is zoned R30, so a residential zoning district of Wake Counties. So that is some of the existing zoning in this area. So again, because this property was not in Rolesville's planning jurisdiction until 2021, the 2017 comprehensive plan and the future land use map don't contemplate the best future uses for this. So it's not on the comprehensive plan's future land use map. This is an image taken from that future land use map. The orange or yellowy down here, this is the medium density residential land classification. And this is surrounding, in all areas, medium density residential is the either planned land use or the actual on the ground land use. Regarding transportation and traffic, the applicant did submit an ITE trip generation report, which shows that, and this was, the input was 660 storage units, which is variable. It may be different at the time that they develop, but to give an idea, this would create 120 daily trips, 12 in the AM peak and 13 in the PM peak hours. And as is located in your staff memo, here's just an exhibit from the town's transportation plan that shows the Jones Dairy Road ultimate design or layout of that street, just to give an idea of what that street is envisioned to be ultimately as it relates to the frontage of this subject property. So the general industrial district has 28 permitted by right uses and 12 uses by special exception. Building heights are 35 or 60 with fire sprinkler systems, building setbacks 30, 15, and 35. And again, all the usual parking, buffer yard landscaping, and screening requirements that would get implemented at the time of site development. This slide contains the 4 conditions that the applicant's proposing to do, and I've got further slides to detail them. So condition 1 is basic general compliance to this concept plan, which is included in your packet. Zooming in a little bit more, so essentially it is single-story storage buildings, 3 smaller buildings that ring the outside, and 1 larger climate-controlled building in the center. Stormwater pond on the deepest portion of the property. There is an existing utility easement area here. This is identified as an undisturbed vegetative, basically no build area. And again, a driveway to be determined. The exact location will be a DOT site plan determination. Condition 2 is to this undisturbed vegetative area here on the south boundary, adjacent these existing residential homes. So it's a commitment to not build or disturb in this area. Condition 3 is regarding upping the light standard to full cutoff facilities. So this is what a full cutoff does with light. For instance, the cutoff, this is what the LDO currently has as a minimum standard. So it will greatly reduce the glare and the offloading of light.
Are there hours of operations for light like that?
There's none in the LDO that I'm aware of. We can come back to that question if we may. Condition 4 is about, in this particular area right here, where there's a break between the buildings, and I believe this is mostly due to accessing the stormwater area for maintenance and so forth, and access to this easement area. The applicant is committing to, if the native trees have to be removed for whatever reason through the development process, that they would replant certain amounts of evergreen trees at minimum spacing size, et cetera. So basically filling that gap with vegetation, and this was, I think, identified as a concern of the nearby residents to the direct south here, plan south. The summary here is that staff's really not providing any further comment and no specific recommendation of support or opposition to this. It is truly a land use question that has no direct guidance from prior approvals, meaning the comprehensive plan, that future land use, doesn't designate this as industrial or appropriate for general industrial zoning, nor does it directly call it out for medium density residential or anything else for that matter. It's an area that has not been officially planned by the town due to that annexation agreement that only occurred about a year or so ago. So GI is similar or the same as the Wake County existing zoning. Should that be a reason for consideration of this zoning request? It is noted that self-storage use is a very low intensity and actually a modern service-oriented land use for residential. It can be a good neighbor compared to many other either industrial, commercial uses, if done correctly with the proper design standards. And again, annexation is necessary for this property to provide it with central utilities. And that is the intention shown in the concept plan, that this will not be a well and septic. So that's why the voluntary annexation petition is riding along with this. Here's a slide containing some proposed motions that the board could take. Again, approval, denial, or if you wish to come up with another one, perhaps looking at their conditions of approval or their concept plan. So I've got both slides with motions here that we can come back to after deliberation and the applicant's presentation, and the applicant does have a presentation planned. Are there any questions for staff?
No. I don't have any.
Nope. Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening. Chair Powers, members of the Planning Board, my name is Ashley Honeycutt-Terrazas. I'm with Parker Poe, and I'm working with the applicant on this case. We also have Sean McKinley from Rivercrest Realty here with us, and Garrett Frank from the Timmons Group, who's been helping us do some kind of come up with this concept plan and kind of what could work for this site. He's a civil engineer. So thank you so much, Mike, for explaining those requests. I'm going to explain them all out. I know we've all been here a long time this evening, so I'll try to run through it quickly, and I'm going to explain it in reverse because we actually filed the annexation and zoning first, which kind of prompted the text amendment request. So, this case involves 3 different requests, an annexation, and then along with that, you have to have a zoning request. So that's what we're asking for tonight. And then a text amendment. It's going to facilitate the development of a more upscale self-storage facility than what's otherwise permitted on the site today, and designed in a way that can be more sensitive to the neighbors and the requests that we've heard from them throughout this process. So, this is about a 5.5 acre site. As you all know, there's a lot of existing and forthcoming residential development in this area. So this is going to be, the idea is for this to be a service for them, for an amenity for the folks in this area. So the first request, again, Mike explained it. This is we have to annex. Again, this was just last year because of an agreement between Wake Forest and Rollsville. It was just annexable by Rollsville as of last year. And then this is our request for the proposed zoning that we're requesting here. As Mike mentioned, it's already zoned Industrial 1 in Wake County, and it's Industrial 1 kind of all the way to that corner there. And self-storage storage is permitted under the current zoning in Wake County. The primary driver for filing this request at all is to get utilities, to be able to provide the kind of indoor storage facility. For example, if we want to have an indoor sprinkler system, we need access to utilities, which again, we will pay for those connections. We're not asking the town to pay for connections to utilities. So like I said, because the annexation has to be accompanied by the zoning, we chose the district, again, where what we're asking for is permitted and is kind of most analogous to what it's zoned today. That's your general industrial district. And this is a brief timeline that goes over some of the work that we've been doing over the past few months. We had a pre-application meeting with staff. We filed at the beginning of September. We've had 2 neighborhood meetings. The first one was virtual before we even got comments from the town. So that was just really to kind of let the neighbors know what was going on. We showed them our initial concept and got some feedback from them. Then we had a TRC meeting with staff. We had another neighborhood. We refiled the case in light of some of that feedback. We had another an in-person neighborhood meeting right over there at the community center, again, to kind of show neighbors the updates. And then we've also had another TRC meeting with staff, and all along, Mike and Meredith can tell you, we've had several informal calls and discussions, and I've had several calls and meetings with neighbors as well that have reached out to me. So this just kind of goes through how we've responded to some of that feedback, and I'm going to go into that in a little more detail. Again, we heard a desire for the certainty of the layout, even though this is a relatively small project, pretty straightforward, but we heard that they wanted a little more certainty to the layout and the use and the development, and so we incorporated that concept plan as a condition. At the first neighborhood meeting, the neighbors asked for us to preserve some of those trees, existing trees at the rear property line, so we kind of reworked how we thought we could do the stormwater pond and at the back, and we've committed to we're not going to disturb any vegetation within 55 feet of the property line. Mike mentioned there's a 32-foot utility easement back there, so really when you look at the surveyed tree line, it's about 20 feet of trees, and then because of the landscape buffers, we would be putting landscaping in there. It just couldn't be trees. And that's, again, a minimum commitment. It could be we're able to preserve more at site plan. We just don't have that yet. We don't have the stormwater pond designed yet. We heard a concern about light pollution from several of the neighbors, and so we looked at, okay, what does the code require? What can we commit to additionally to that? And that's where that condition for the full cutoff light fixtures came from. And then we also heard a request to remove the parking from the rear of the site. Originally, the way that we had this designed, there was a little bit of parking there at the end of the rear of the site. And so we, on our concept plan, removed that from the rear of the site, put it at the front, and then that's part of what prompted the text amendment. And then we also heard a concern about the gap in the buildings at the southeast corner of the site, like Mike explained, and so we committed to, I mean, ideally, we'd be able to keep the trees there. We don't have a grading plan yet, so we talked to this neighbor who brought this concern to us, and we kind of unpacked that, and she just really wanted a little more screening there if it happened that we had to take out the trees. So we committed to planting these fast-growing evergreen trees, if we do need to take those trees out for grading. So this is just, again, putting these conditions up on the screen for you. The first condition, incorporating that concept plan. Again, this is similar language to what you've seen in the past. This is our concept plan again, and I think y'all may have it in front of you. So again, like Mike said, committing to that one-story climate control building in the center. Those outer buildings are really going to act like a wall for neighbors. They'll be landscaped behind them, but really it's going to be shielding them from any light or what have you on the site. The parking will be at the front, and then the stormwater in the back. It's going to be paved. We're not talking about a gravel development here. So that's and folks really wanted a commitment to kind of this general layout. So this is what we did in the first condition. Second condition, again, like I mentioned, that undisturbed vegetation. There's like Mike said, 32-foot utility easement, but we're not going to disturb anything within 55 feet of the property line. We know that we can definitely commit to that. And so we made that commitment in the zoning conditions. Again, the light, full cutoff light fixtures. And then this kind of shows the area where we're talking about, again, committing to covering that gap, planting additional trees that would not otherwise be required if we do have to take out those trees for grading. Which brings me to the text amendment. This layout is not possible. Being able to respond to these concerns is not really possible unless we can make these kind of minor tweaks to the LDO. To my knowledge, there's only one self-storage facility in Rollsville, and it's been there quite a while, the Storage Max on Main Street. So I believe this is the first request for this use that y'all have seen. Y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but I had not seen any other ones. So the first thing we're going to do, that we would like to do with the text amendment, is to clarify, which use it belongs under. We, in conversations with Mike and Meredith, we landed on, light industrial. We'll keep it there. That's how they had kind of been looking at it in the past. We're going to remove the one building limit for the self-storage facilities, again, so that we can have those buildings on the outer part that are going to act like a wall for our neighbors. Then we are asking to reduce the amount of parking to be more in line with market demand for the use. Mike mentioned this briefly, but it really is not a use that requires a lot of parking. So I also have some clients who develop self-storage in Raleigh, which doesn't have a parking minimum, and they're in site plan right now, and they're building like big, 4-story facilities, and they're providing 5 parking spaces. I mean, it's just not, you come, you rent your unit, and you maybe buy some packing materials, but you really don't park at a self-storage facility. So this is just going to bring it more in line with what is actually needed, what the market demands. And so instead of having to provide, those 25 parking spaces, we can provide fewer parking spaces. We don't need, the amount of parking we need at the front. And then again, for we would be allowed to provide it at the front. That's just for this use. Other industrial developments in Rollsville would still be subject to that requirement for the parking in the rear or on the side. But this is, again, that was a specific request that we got from one of the neighbors. They do not want parking in the back. So again, and this is just a red line of what we would be changing. So it's not, it's pretty minimal. And that should be in your packet as well.
Quick Question.
Yes.
Do you have a similar product like this elsewhere in the county
In Wake County,
or nearby?
We don't, but there's several examples of that.
I see.
yeah.
Another quick question.
Sure.
The building near Jones Dairy School, what size is that? What's the depth? Not the length, but the depth?
The depth of that?
10 feet? And so the parking area is about 30, I mean, the driveway's like 30 feet or? Okay.
Is the parking going to be gated? The entire facility will be gated, including the parking, right?
Oh, yeah, do y'all want to come up and speak at the lectern? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sean McKinley with Rivercrest. If you see in the front portion, I guess I could use this mouse here. See, there'll be a gate here and a gate leaving as well.
Okay, but the parking will not be gated.
No, sir. So
Okay,
you park in
My
the front.
concern that you might want to think about is you're right next to an elementary school that has a lot of parent pickups, and they will start parking in your parking lot instead of waiting in line and tell their kids to walk over to your property to pick their kids up rather than wait in the line.
I love your concern, and zero parking would be great for me.
That's why I bring it up.
I think that's a really good point. I would say, though, that a lot of that parking is going to be used for people that don't have a unit yet and don't have a code to get in. And so, if they want to come in and say, hey, I want to rent a unit, how would they get in?
You have to have some spaces.
Yeah, at least
I'm not saying get rid of parking. I'm saying you might want to figure out a way of getting it behind a gate.
Get some signage.
Or at least be ready to have a towing company on speed dial,
yeah, the
because
second one's
I'm
probably-
telling you,
Yeah,
that's what's
maybe
gonna
a warning
happen.
sign.
That's what's gonna happen.
Yeah, this, like a customer, I mean, that's a good point. Customer parking only, like towing enforced or something.
I would bells and whistles and spotlights on those signs and park a towing truck, and park a towing truck there. I'm not kidding. I mean,
That stretch of road gets brutal.
It does.
Yeah.
And that's what they're gonna do. They're gonna not wait in that line. They're gonna text their kids, say, hey, I'm going to self-storage, come over here. Because they already had to control that wooded lot in between there and control people parking in there for that same reason. So I just,
There's no outside storage, like they could pick up trucks or trailers or RVs or anything like that can be stored on the site. How about these, the building over towards the opposite side? How big is that one?
It's 20 feet of depth, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, so somebody could park a truck in there or a vehicle or something.
Oh, into the facility? I guess they could, but.
Yeah.
What are
There's
the
no-
heights of those buildings that are on the exterior? Are they single level?
It's all single level, 10 to 11 feet.
So it's not a two-story controlled, that's just one story?
No, we wanted to keep it a single-story facility. We think it keeps in concert with the neighborhood. Also, when you are the homes in the rear of Tortuga, if they're looking at
Right.
elevation, I just think it's a better product for the community.
I agree.
Will there be employees on site at the facility?
Yes, sir. Yes, you have, it's less and less in the storage industry, but you definitely have people there 4 to 5 days a week.
No one's living on this site, like some of the old concept.
That used to be a model, and that is a model. That's not our model.
What's the front elevation? You have a photograph or a concept of the elevation?
I don't think we've gotten to that step yet. We're just kind of laying it out and seeing how it can fit on the site. I don't have a rendering of what the front is going to look like.
You did mention that the entire facility will have a sprinkler system as well? So water, utilities?
The middle building will.
The middle.
You don't sprinkle the exterior facility.
right.
That's the 3 around.
Okay.
Is there a fence around Jones Ferry, the elementary?
I don't,
no,
there's
not
not.
that I'm aware of.
Fence the pond to prevent kids from wandering over there.
Yeah.
that might be
It's a
something.
good point.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything in the UDO that addresses that, is there, Meredith?
No.
Is there anything in the UDO that addresses fencing around stormwater pump control?
And the only reason I'd say is because you got an elementary school right there.
Yeah. That's something we can take a look at.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's a dry pond, right? not a wet,
No, it would be a wet pond.
it
to
would
get
be a
the-
wet pond?
Yeah.
Yeah,
To get the
definitely.
nutrient removal you need for Wake County's stormwater
Hmm.
regulations, it would have to be a wet pond.
Okay.
Yeah, staff's pretty positive without looking at it. There is a 6-foot fence requirement when it's wet. Dry ponds do not need that.
And I get your point, because they have, and it's not a,
Curious the monkeys.
it's not a, I don't think it's a regulated stormwater facility, but the school has some wetland areas that they fenced off just to prevent kids, so I understand.
High schoolers could deal with it.
Will y'all have to widen the property frontage on this site?
Like we're dedicating the right-of-way.
I was talking about widen to the ultimate road width.
Not that I'm aware of.
I think this kind of lends itself back to Michael's comments of this little area is kind of outside of all the planning documents that the town observed.
I'll take a swing. So the property is platted. It's a platted lot. At the time of site development plan, that's when things like the driveway location and the right-of-way will be looked at, and it'll be determined what their frontage improvements will need to be. It's a DOT facility, so I think ultimately it may come down to the DOT's call there. As my slide showed, though, there is an ultimate cross-section for Jones Dairy Road, and it's obviously much bigger than what we see out there today. The traffic volumes, again, a DOT requirement may require a left turn into this. It depends. We're seeing that in some other roadways where the traffic volume, just the background traffic volume is at a point where any development needs to have a turn lane into it, like a left turn. So those are TBD at the time of site development plan, which is the expectation that that'll be the next step of development for this should they get the zoning in place. So that they should be skipping subdivision, but most often time when you do a site plan, you have to come up with some easements and so forth, or maybe some right-of-way, so you're doing some form of platting of the property at a later stage to create easements that are determined through the site planning process.
Board Member Moss, where were you going with that question?
I'm just familiar with some other projects on Jones Dairy Road where there's an ultimate, I think, 5-lane road section.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if this one would have to improve their property frontage to their one half of that 5-lane section or not.
Okay.
I guess according to Mr. Ellenbarger, that'll come up in the plan design stage, whether that's a requirement or not.
And I'm assuming based on the drawing and the notation that you're not going to disturb the southern section of this, everything else, because it's all planted pines, you're just going to clear cut all the pines and then replant the green areas?
I don't think, that's not our intention, because, we have to meet the UDA requirements of tree
Trees?
save area.
Mhm.
And,
Right.
and we're, we're also not interested in paying thousands of dollars on additional landscaping when we have a lot of mature trees on site.
Okay.
I just think the complexity of the grading of a, self-storage that's all one level, we don't know exactly where those pockets are gonna be, but the intent is, if we can meet the LDO buffer requirements with existing vegetation.
Then you won't
It's
just
our-
clear cut all the pines
No, yeah,
for
it's
the
our-
money and
I
replant?
think this is a young stand of pines. I don't think there's
Okay. Okay.
there's a lot of value to it, other than that dense vegetation from the neighbors.
Good.
What would be the hours of operation for this facility that a customer could come in and drop off or pick up?
So the office would be usually open between 9 to 5. Not, most of the time we're open 12 to 5 on Sundays, and then Saturdays reduced hours as well.
So if no one's there, then you can't access the facility at all?
You can access the facility with a keypad.
Okay.
To the
So
extent.
would that be limited at all, or would that be 24 hours a day?
That's 24.
Would it be lit 24/7?
For safety, yes, sir.
Yeah. But again, the full cutoff lighting and the backs of the buildings are what you're gonna see usually from that side.
Is there that much of a demand after midnight for people visiting the facility?
Self-storage is one of the lowest trip generators. Of our facilities, we monitor how long people stay at a facility, and typically a length of stay is about 10 to 11 months. So I'll paint that picture for you. You come, drop off all your stuff, and very rarely do you come back for 10 to 11 months. So,
I guess where I'm getting with that is would you be opposed if there were limited hours of operation, say after 11 p.m. till 5 in the morning? Because that is a heavily residential area, and just having people going and coming at, or the ability for people to go and come at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning may be disturbing to some people.
So in the 2 neighborhood meetings, we did talk about this. That certainly did come up. That wasn't a
There was
specific
a
request that
concern
was
that-
made, but, we can look
Are
at.
those restrictions in place for the one right here in town? I don't think that's gated and available 24/7 right now, right?
There's not as many residential. I mean, it's not in the middle
But
of.
you got a big
nowhere.
parking
think,
lot and all the food line, all the next to it versus houses.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
this, Jones Dairy's lit 24/7.
Elementary school.
All
is,
elementary
yeah.
schools are, all the schools have some lighting.
You've got
24/7.
Wall
Yeah.
Creek. Wall
Well,
Creek
you
is
would-
right there
you wanna
too,
keep the
so it's
lights
about
on
the same
here
amount of.
24/7.
I think it's about the same
Definitely.
amount of exposure because that's a heating and cooling company on the east side.
Yeah.
So I think it's about the same.
So the lights would be attached to the building, they're not on poles?
That, like the wall packs? Yeah, that would be.
Yeah, so that's going to be contained within except at the road?
that's correct. That's why we like less parking. There's less uninhibited.
Things like that.
So your light's contained except for the road?
That was another reason to do the text amendment of more than one building, because our site kind of encompasses, it encloses itself from the users, from the neighbors.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we saw benefit. I think the concept speaks for how that design lends itself better to the.
Back to the comment about walkways or design for 5 lanes or whatever. If you've got an issue with kids and moms, dads picking up after school, not having a walkway, in this case, may be something that.
They already walk through the woods right there as it is.
Yeah.
They already do. You won't stop them.
No, that's a road that needs a walkway. There are way too many close calls.
Yeah.
There are people who
There
are
are
live on the
people
road.
walking on
Yeah.
that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's
Oh,
a
yeah.
neighborhood right across the street, and it's dangerous getting to the school just from the neighborhood across the street from the school. So yeah, it's pretty nasty.
Yeah, especially with the gas station down the hill. People walking to and from that place after dark.
Right.
And it gets real tight up against the road through there. We have 2 items to vote on. The text amendment and map.
What do you think, I have one more question.
Okay.
What do you think on the elevation? Are you talking brick, are you talking metal, or, what are you thinking?
Ethos.
Stucco look?
Yeah, ethos and stucco.
There's some design standards too, as well, outlined in the UDA, it's just not a huge blanket this wall or.
It'll have to have some architectural elements.
Correct.
To break it.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, hearing any more questions or comments, I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions? I'd like to make a motion to recommend the approval of map amendment rezoning request, MA 22-09, and voluntary annexation petition, ANX 22-08 for Jones Dairy Storage.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second for MA 22-09/ANX 22-08 with a second.
Does the text amendment have to come first in respect
We
to?
can do the text amendment next. They were presented in reverse order.
I just wasn't sure if it was if it had to come first based on their design. Doesn't
Yeah, we've had this discussion before. I think when it gets to the board, when they're making like the final decision, the order is going to be.
Yeah, I believe the text amendment
Super.
should
Has to
come
come
first
first
because
because of
the
the-
map amendment, that
Yeah.
picture is wholly dependent, largely
Any
dependent on the text
reason
amendment.
why we couldn't roll everything all together?
For you all, no. You could make one recommendation on all three. We can use their slide right there.
So we'll revise it and add text amendment 22-02.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we have a revised motion. Is there still a second?
Second what he said.
Thank you. All those in favor, please give me an aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, it is unanimous.
Thank you all so much and Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Which leaves us, well, one last alibi, other business. Everybody, please have some very safe and very happy holidays. May you get to spend peaceful time with loved ones.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
And with that,
Same?
for the last time,
I have one comment to make. This has been the longest planning board meeting I think I've sat with you. And that's your last one.
It's the last one.
No, this
second
is probably the-
longest.
Yeah, probably the second longest. yeah,
Second
but-
longest. I think we've been here till 11 before.
No, I'll say I appreciate everything you've done, and thank you for serving and being the chairman of this group for many years.
Thank
so.
you.
But with that, I'd like to make a motion, we adjourn.
We have a motion and a second. It's
been a pleasure serving with you.
Please give me an aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Didn't think so. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. It's been great.
And thank you.